Everybody got it?
Yeah, I think you're
Go
good.
ahead.
You're good.
Well,
You're good.
ready to click in? Good.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's start. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a regularly scheduled meeting of the Zoning Commission of the City of Danbury. This is a web-based meeting hosted on Zoom and also available on YouTube, July 12th, 2022 at 7:30 p.m. Let the record show we're going to begin with a roll call at 7:38. Commissioner Coelho is here.
Here.
Commissioner David.
Here.
Commissioner Fay.
Here.
Commissioner Hawley.
Here.
Commissioner Hylinski, not yet, will come back. Commissioner Jowdy.
Here.
Commissioner Malillo
I'm here.
is here. Commissioner Rea.
Here.
Commissioner Bennett, I don't see, is absent. Commissioner Duran, absent. Commissioner Mahia, absent. And I'm Chairman Haddad. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9. Double check, triple check. We got the full body here tonight.
We're just waiting. We're just waiting for Angie.
Just waiting for Angie. That's right. I put down, I checked her off because I saw her a minute ago.
Yeah, me too.
All right. So we got 8 right now. We're waiting on Angie. When she comes, we'll buzz her in. The next regular meeting is scheduled for July 26th, 2022. If we could all stand and hold our flags for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
To the
of the
flag
United States
of the United
America,
States of America
and
and
to the republic for which it
for which it
stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with liberty and justice
justice
for all.
for all.
Thank you very much. Let me read for the record the Zoom instructions, virtual Zoom meetings. The meeting of the Danbury Zoning Commission is being held on Zoom as a virtual meeting. Even though this meeting is a virtual meeting, members of the public and interested parties continue to have the opportunity to participate in the meeting in a couple of different ways. You can participate via Zoom and see the audio and the video, or you can call in by phone and participate via audio only. Please be aware that we may have to mute your microphone or telephone to avoid an echo or some other background noise. This is also being streamed live via YouTube. Instructions on how to participate in the meeting appear on the City of Danbury website, and all of the documents and materials that apply to the matters to be discussed during this meeting, including the agenda, are also available on the City of Danbury website. As always, if you have any questions, please contact the City of Danbury Planning and Zoning Department. As a reminder, the entire meeting will be posted on and can be seen on the City of Danbury website. We will follow the posted agenda as per standard practice. If prior to the meeting, any questions or comments on agenda items were submitted via email to Sharon Cleacho, those comments will be read during the appropriate portion of the meeting. Finally, please remember that technology glitches sometimes do occur. Please be patient if that happens. Let us now go to the minutes of June 28, 2022. Everybody saw the link. Everybody got a copy. Everybody reviewed it. I'd be looking here to see if anyone would like to make a motion to accept the June 28, 2022 minutes. Mr. Jowdy makes a motion to accept. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Hawley. Any discussion, changes, deletions, modifications, alterations? Not hearing any. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Not seeing any negative hands or hearing any negative. The minutes pass unanimously. Wonder how Rob's making out with
She's trying to connect to audio. Her phone is here. I'm waiting to see if she can hear us. That's what, okay, it's okay if your microphone's muted. Okay, can you turn your video on? Okay, now it looks like I can hear myself speaking. Okay, Angie's in.
Great. Joanne, did you see her pop in yet? Yes. Good.
Yeah, I can see here. I can't see your picture, but. it looks
Okay,
like
let the
you-
record show it's 7:43. Commissioner Hylinski has zoomed in. Let us go to the first. Let me read the legal notice if I could find it. Legal notice. Notice is hereby given that the zoning commission of the city of Danbury will hold public hearings commencing at 7:30 p.m. on Tuesday, July 12, 2022, in a web-based meeting hosted on Zoom to consider the following matters. Petition of Sharon B. Calitro, Planning Director, to amend Section 10J of the zoning regulations, in parentheses, extend temporary moratorium on acceptance of applications, amendments, petitions, and issuance of zoning approvals for or related to cannabis establishments for 1 year or upon future action of zoning commission, whichever date comes first. Another petition is of Sharon B. Calitro, Planning Director, to amend sections 2B, 3C4, 5A, 2B, 5A5, 5B, 2B, 5B5, 6A, 2B, 6B, 2B, 8C, 4C, 10J, 11B2, 11B3 of the zoning regulations, in parentheses, amendments to clarify definitions of cannabis establishments, allow and regulate specific adult use cannabis establishments in specified zoning districts, establish a parking requirement, and prohibit issuance of variances for said cannabis uses. Copies of these applications are on file in the town clerk and planning and zoning offices for public inspection. Parties and interests and citizens shall have an opportunity to be heard at this time. Agenda will be posted and include instructions on how to access the Zoom meeting and application materials and view the meeting in real time on YouTube. Theodore J. Haddad, Jr. Chairman. This was posted on the city website and town clerk's office on June 28, 2022, published in News Times on July 1st, 2022, and July 8, 2022. Purchase order 2021174. Ms. Hylinski has been here for the legal notice, so everyone now qualifies that it's been read and heard. The first petition this evening is Sharon B. Calitro, Planning Director, to amend Section 10J of the zoning regulations, extend temporary moratorium on acceptance of applications, amendments, petitions, and issuance of zoning approvals for or related to cannabis establishments for 1 year or upon future action of the zoning commission date, whichever comes first. Let's see, I have the planning commission recommendation here, dated July 7, 2022. Theodore J. Haddad, Jr., Chairman, Danbury Zoning Commission, from Arnold E. Finaldi, Jr., Chairman, Danbury Planning Commission, regarding 8.3A referral. Petition Sharon B. Calitro, Planning Director, to amend Section 10J of the zoning regulations, extend temporary moratorium on acceptance of applications, amendments, petitions, and issuance of zoning approvals for or related to cannabis establishments for 1 year or upon future action of the zoning commission, whichever date comes first. At the web-based Zoom meeting held on June 15, 2022, the City of Danbury Planning Commission voted to give the above referenced petition a positive recommendation for the following reasons. Approval of this petition will extend the moratorium. Approval of this petition will extend the moratorium should a decision by the zoning commission on another petition currently under consideration not occur prior to the current expiration date of July 29th, 2022, or if said petition is denied. This would allow the commission to assess cannabis establishment uses within the city of Danbury and determine the most appropriate regulatory framework for said uses. The motion to give this a positive recommendation was made by Mr. Sylvain, seconded by Mrs. Hofstetter, and passed by voice vote with 5 ayes from Mr. Chioccio, Mrs. Hofstetter, Mr. Sylvain, Mr. Haas, and Chairman Finaldi. I'm just noticing here the dates. Our next meeting is July 26th, and I see that and I'm sure we'll be reminded of it shortly, that the current moratorium expires on the 29th. From the Westcog recommendation, a request was made to them, and they responded back June 7th, 2022. The opinion of Westcog staff is that the proposal is of local interest with minimal intermunicipal impact. Therefore, it is not being forwarded to adjacent municipalities, and the regional staff is making no comment. Let me go to Ms. Calitro regarding the staff report. Ms. Calitro.
Thank you, Chairman. So we have submitted a petition to amend Section 10J of the zoning regulations to extend the moratorium on acceptance of applications, amendments, petitions, and issuance of zoning approvals for or related to cannabis establishments until July 29th, 2023, or upon future action of the Zoning Commission. So let me just take a step back in time about a year ago or so, after the regulation. I'm going to give you the acronym because I'm going to use it tonight a bunch of times, but it's the Responsible and Equitable Regulation of Adult Use Cannabis. So it's RERACA, as I'm going to refer to it later on. But that law was passed in the state of Connecticut in June of 2021. And shortly thereafter, staff submitted a petition to the commission, which defined cannabis establishment uses for our regulations and proposed a moratorium for a year so that we could evaluate the 300 pages of legislation that was adopted in June. So the moratorium was set, that was approved by you last year. And so the moratorium is in place for 1 year, from July of last year to July 29th, 2022, which is in a couple of weeks. So we submitted this petition because, as you know, we have also submitted a simultaneous petition with regulations for cannabis establishment uses in the city, which we're going to address later on. But in the meantime, we submitted this petition to extend the moratorium for a year. And the purpose of that is to allow the zoning commission sufficient time to review those regulations and keep the moratorium in place. And it's kind of a belt and suspenders. Should you not act by the 29th of July, which is in 2.5 weeks, the moratorium will remain in place until a year passes or until you act on those regulations or some other regulations. If you don't act on those regulations, it will give us time to determine what you want to do. And if you act on those regulations before the 29th or shortly thereafter, the moratorium automatically expires. So it kind of gives us a little bit of belt and suspenders to keep everything status quo while you're considering regulations on a different petition that are in front of you. So we propose to just change the date from July 29th, 2022 to July 29th, 2023, again, or upon the future action of the Zoning Commission, whichever occurs first. So it would be, the year would be at the latest, and something could happen before then, but it would keep the status quo while it gave you some time to consider other petitions that are currently in front of you. So with that, I think it's fairly simple. I would recommend that you do that. I think it's conservative for this commission to consider, that additional year. And should you act again, the moratorium would automatically expire. So I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Yes, commission members, any questions of Ms. Calitro at this time?
I have a question.
Commissioner David, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. So who's going to trigger if we get this action going to accept the guidelines, regulations that you have here? Who's going to move the ball if they're okay and people want to approve it before the 23rd of 2023? How's that going to happen?
So if you, under the scenario that you voted to extend the moratorium, should you approve the regulations that are in front of you under another petition, that extension would automatically end upon your approval of the other petition, because it says up until July 29th, 2023, or upon an action of the zoning commission. So if you vote to approve something, the moratorium would obviously expire.
So somebody has to make a motion to put these guidelines, regulations to action, and then we vote. Is that correct?
Yes, you have to act on the other petition one way or another, right? So one way or another, you'll either vote to approve it or you vote to deny it. If you vote to approve it, the extension, which I'm asking for, would automatically expire. If you vote to deny it, then the moratorium would remain in place so that you could consider what you might want to do. If you don't want to do anything, then we just lift the moratorium and we go back to where we were last year, which is the city has allowed 2 medical facilities with several restrictions. You would just go back to what you were previously. We would, that's how that scenario would play out. But there has to be an action on the other petition in order for the extension to.
That was my question. That's the answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Calitro. Thank you, Commissioner David. Commission members, any other questions at this time? Any other questions of Ms. Calitro at this time? No, I don't see any. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Calitro. Is there anyone wishing to speak in favor of this petition? Is that Councilman Rotello?
It is, sir.
So why don't we do that? Councilman Levy, did you have your hand up also? You are on deck.
Yes,
So we'll have you go right after Councilman Rotello. Councilman Rotello, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Paul Rotello for the record, 13 Linden Place, Danbury. I support wholeheartedly this petition. As you know, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to end a moratorium and start accepting applications for an ordinance that we do not have, and we do not have one at the moment. We might have one an hour from now. We don't have one right now. So since this is something that we have never done before, and I'm not suggesting that Danbury can't do things it's never done before, but since we've never done this before, I think it's important that we proceed with restraint. And I appreciate the conservative process that Director Calitro has implemented. It gives this body and perhaps other bodies, because the statute's not particularly clear whether the zoning commission has to do this or the city council has to do this or whatever, but at some point somebody's going to have to do this. And in the meantime, we have plenty of time to get this done properly and soberly and conservatively. And as you know, if we say yes, we can't say no, but we can always expand that yes. We can't make it narrower, but we can make it broader. So let's not do anything until, in my opinion, we are all comfortable with whatever it is that the zoning commission or if that fails, the city council is proposing. So by all means, let's keep the moratorium in place, or the new moratorium, and then work on getting this settled once and for all, so we can open for business if that's what the city decides to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Rotello. Commission members, any question of Councilman Rotello at this time? Not seeing or hearing. Councilman Levy, you're up at bat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And let me start by, I don't typically get involved with comments on the zoning commission. Teddy, you probably have never seen me here. But
it is a pleasure. It is a pleasure to see you, though.
Oh, it is a pleasure to see you as well.
Thank you.
And I thank everybody on the commission for doing the work they do in a volunteer way, no compensation, and molding the city for what it is, which it is a very good city. This particular issue is very important to the quality of life here in Danbury, and that's why I was interested in my comments, and I did a little research on it. And if you'll allow me a little leeway here, I'll explain how I came to the conclusion I'm going to support what Ms. Calitro has proposed in the way of a moratorium. I do support that because along the way in trying to gather information on this issue, I had several questions that were unanswered, even though the law was probably 300 pages long. They probably wrote it while they were sipping on some liquid refreshment. and didn't cover all the bases and the importance of this issue. I talked to the police chief, and he has concerns as well, but he also understands it is the law of the land here in Connecticut, and we have to deal with it. After I pretty well settled out all of the moral issues, personally, I'm in favor of a medical marijuana and opposed to recreational marijuana. But understanding the realities are that the state of Connecticut was put in a position of competing with surrounding states, Massachusetts, New York, and some of the other states that had previously approved marijuana sales. And Connecticut was left having to actually be put in that position to create a law. They in turn passed this along to the municipalities, each one having to decide how they want to handle it. My understanding at this point is that if we don't approve some type of zoning, that the monetary portion of it would go to, let's say, Waterbury. If they approved it in Waterbury and somebody from Danbury purchased this on the web, that the 3% profits would go to Waterbury. So the morality issue is put aside, and it comes down to, is the risk worth the reward? And at this point, there's a lot of unanswered questions as to who would collect the money. Would this work like the transfer of land, where we get 3%, where the state takes half of that and the municipality gets the other 1.5%? In real numbers, we talk about if $10 million was generated, the city would see 300,000, or half of that, 150,000, wouldn't even cover the cost of administering the program. So it really boils down to answering the question as to how the money is handled, how we're going to get it. Has anybody done any financial projections on this? Are we going to spend more money on administering the program than we will in retrieving the money? It's not a lot of money, and there has to be some projections on what the sales would be.
Excuse me if I can, Councilman Levy.
Certainly.
You have a lot of good information and a lot of interesting questions. I think they're more appropriate for the actual petition that comes next. You can directly ask Ms. Calitro those questions during the presentation of her the next petition. This one is just for the moratorium portion. So I hope your schedule allows you to remain here. I don't know if you were getting your next petition's comments out now because you had scheduling issues, but if you could stay with us here, these are excellent questions for the next petition. I didn't want to cut you off, but I just wanted to let you know.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, as you know, I don't comment usually at your meeting. I was only trying to give the background as to my conclusion of being supportive of the moratorium that Ms. Calitro has presented. And I'll finish my comments.
And if we don't see you for the next petition, I'm sure Ms. Calitro would address some of those questions that you had anyway, because I'm sure some of those questions are on other people's minds as well. Points well taken. Thank you so much. Commission members, any questions of Councilman Levy at this time?
Commissioner Haddad.
Yes, Mr. Malone, please.
Yeah, so this is more of a clarification and maybe a question for Mr. Levy. I kind of took a different view as to what he was saying, as he was giving us a justification for the moratorium, pointing out that this evening we may not even be able to get answers to stuff. And so for that reason, there might even be a need to continue this public hearing, which would then therefore potentially kick us past the July 29th date, which would be a reason to support the moratorium. So is that kind of what you were alluding to, Mr. Levy?
Through the chair, yes, that's exactly what my motivation for comments were.
I hope I didn't cut you off. Did you have more that you wanted to go through, Councilman Levy?
I don't want to be repetitious. And I don't have I just did a very cursory type of a look at the entire proposal. So if we have a moratorium, that gives us everybody plenty of time to study it. And we can also look at other communities that perhaps are acting on it and find out where the pitfalls are and clean up our act a little bit. So thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you. Anything else of Councilman Levy at this time? Commission members, any questions? Thank you, Councilman Levy. Do I have any more hands for those wishing to speak in favor? I see Councilman Perkins.
Well, no, never. I don't want to speak
In favor of the moratorium, sir.
No.
Okay.
I'll wait.
I'm sorry, say again?
I'll wait to speak against the moratorium.
Okay, all right. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the moratorium? Any of this petition? Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this petition? Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this petition? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition to this petition? Councilman Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, commissioners.
Good evening.
I did support the initial 1-year moratorium once the state of Connecticut made recreation legal, but I don't support a whole other year of another moratorium. The body has had quite some time to do research to look at other states and municipalities that are already conducting the legal sales of recreation. And I'm not really sure how deep down you all have dug into that process. Just an hour and 20 minutes or so up Route 7, you'll see a whole variety of different types of recreational and medical cannabis centers. If you had taken the time like I did to observe some of those places, I think that you'd have a better understanding of what the whole process is. I mean, these places are situated next to Starbucks on Main Street. And here we are blocking out Route 53 for, I don't even know what reason why. So I think that it's not really necessary to keep kicking this can on the road. I think we need to start making some decisions and get this thing on the record. The reason I say it's so important is because being first to market is very important. I mean, you got a company up in Mass called Theory. They were first to market. They're one of the highest, largest volume sellers, they say, not just in the state, on the planet. So being first to market, coming out with your branding, coming out with your proper pricing and promotion, all that stuff matters. And if you do that first, we can capitalize on that revenue stream that's guaranteed from the state. Otherwise, if we don't get out there first, we're going to be putting our different retailers at a disadvantage. So it's important for us to not continue the moratorium and get down to business. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilman Perkins. Commission members, any questions of Councilman Perkins at this time? Any questions? Thank you. Not seeing or hearing. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition to this petition? Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition to this petition? Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition to this petition? Oh, I see a hand. Freedom, would you like to speak in opposition to this petition?
Yes. How you guys doing?
Good. You just went on mute again. Unmute.
Oh,
There you
hear
go.
me?
Stay right there. Don't do it. So go ahead if you want to just state your name and the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Hector Gerardo, and I live on 2 Deal Drive, Danbury, Connecticut. And I'm on opposition, just like the councilman that spoke before me, because we need to get this show on the road. One of the things that I heard in the last meeting that you guys have is that you don't really have an understanding of what social equity means in this bill. So you really need to start talking to people like me, people that did the BLM march in 2020 in Danbury, Connecticut. We really need to get this information out because I feel that you guys are stuck in the old ways. Right now, this is the new industry that is not just marijuana, it's hemp. It's all these different things that you can use this plant for. That is not just to get high, like you guys say. This is more than just getting high. This is about health, and a lot of our young people are using this plant, so we need to educate them. So we need to start educating young people about this, because we have, one of the things that I hear is that we don't want none of this to be close to schools, but we have a brewery in Danbury, Connecticut, right next to a Montessori school, and nobody says anything about that, right? So we need to start really thinking about how we're gonna approach this, and think about the people of color that's been harmed here in Danbury, that's been arrested here in Danbury for possession of cannabis. That is just a plant. It's healthier than a glass of wine. It's healthier than a glass of beer. That's what cannabis is. And you guys are hindering people from making generational wealth, especially here in Danbury. That Black and brown people have been targeted here in Danbury for using this plant. So we need to start understanding and creating equity. So if you don't understand what equity means, start talking to people like me, because people that are being affected are not represented. How many people of color are on this call right now? Just me and the consummate. So amongst white folks are talking about this plant that has been used to criminalize people like me, to put people in jail that look like me. So white people are talking about our future right now, and there's nobody of color in this call. And that's all I wanted to say.
Well, thank you very much. Are there any questions of Mr. Geraldo at this time?
I'd like to make a comment regarding Mr. Geraldo, please.
Sure. Commissioner David, go ahead, please.
Yes. Hey, Mr. Geraldo, I just want to tell you something. In February, I went to the botanist, okay? I took my time just before I went on vacation, took a tour of the botanist. I was very impressed with the botanist. In particular, I went there because, hey, look, I've been a basketball coach, a baseball coach. I had kids, they're older now. Their friends died of drugs. My son's an alcohol and drug counselor. I'm very concerned about the safety, and I saw the safety in this place. I know people are going to do things. There's a lot of good things in cannabis. Some people abuse it, but my concern was I didn't want to see anybody, like, for example, smoking or eating this laced with fentanyl. And the people at the botanist assured me that, you know, they're producers, distributors, where they get this stuff from. They do quality control. When I left there, I had the confidence that they were like any pharmacy I dealt with, Danbury or otherwise. So I'm not stuck in whatever. So I just want to let you know that, okay? I have an open mind to this. I'm with you with kicking the can down the road. I don't want to see the can kicked down the road. So, but we obviously, I want to hear Sharon's second petition, make sure this is all organized. And believe me, I want our youth or our middle-aged people, whoever uses it. I don't use it personally because it doesn't do anything for me. But I understand that I want people to be safe, okay? And I see people like the botanists are helping to make this safe. Thank you.
And can I?
Sure, go ahead.
So I'm with you. I'm with you 100%. It needs to be safe, but we need to understand as well that our young people know where to get this right now. They know where to get this stuff. They know where to go. So even if you are concerned about youth, at the end of the day, this stuff is out there right now. It's not going away. So for us, it's better to create educational spaces for young people to understand what it is, and have an understanding that we haven't done with alcohol and we haven't done with opioids, because a lot of our young people got hooked on opioids in Connecticut because they found it in their parents' cabinets. In their house, they found this opioids. So if we want to have this conversation, we have to be real with that the young people are exposed to all of this through music, through video, through whatever you can see. They are exposed to this. So we need to get ahead of it and start educating instead of putting a stop to something that's already happening in our communities.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other, Councilman David, did you have a question? Commissioner David, did you have another question?
No.
Oh.
I'm with him. It's about
Okay.
kicking it down the road. I'd like to get this thing, again, as safe as soon as possible. Get it organized, get it under control, not the Wild West, people doing drug deals in the back of a park or something, you know?
Got it. Thank you. Anything
So
else?
I'm with
Mr.
Mr.
Geraldo? And let me just say, for the record, as I read before, this was posted on the city's website, town clerk's office, June 28, 2022, published in the News Times on July 1st and July 8, 2022. Mr. Geraldo, the city did its part in letting everyone, black, white, brown, rich, poor, young, old, to come to this meeting tonight. So everyone was invited. I had to make that comment because sometimes we get those misunderstood comments or questions from the public. So I want to clarify that. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition to this petition? Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition to this petition? Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition to this petition? I don't see or hear. Ms. Calitro, any final comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I would just say that, again, we're talking about the regulation of land uses, no different than any other land use. Well, it's a little different than some other land use, obviously. It still remains a Schedule I drug. But the reason for the petition to extend the moratorium is so that it will enable you to consider the regulations that I have proposed under a separate petition that took a long time to do after culling through 300 pages of legislation and talking with various parties and consulting with our legal counsel. So it took a while to put that together, to come back to you. And so in order, fairness, to give you the appropriate time and ensure that we kind of keep things status quo until you make an informed decision and ask all your questions and we get through the process. I have submitted this petition to extend the moratorium. Again, if you act, but within the year, the moratorium would expire. It's a year or until you act on something, whichever comes first. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I conclude my comments.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Commissioner Malillo. We got so many councilmen here. Commissioner Malillo, go.
Yeah, I have a question for Ms. Calitro. This is in relationship to what Councilman Rotella was talking about. He alluded to the fact that there might be some uncertainty as to whether, I'm not going to say as to who should be making this decision. I'm going to say as to whether or not the council, the city council, also plays a role in this. Is there a possibility where the city council could make a decision which would override an action of the zoning commission in this matter? Not on this moratorium, but on this topic.
Well, as you know, you can see Attorney Casagrande and Attorney Edwards are on the call. I will defer to Attorney Casagrande for a legal question relative to that. But again, the petition before you is for an amendment to the zoning. On this petition is to change the date on a regulation that's already in effect, and that is your jurisdiction.
Right, and let me just, before Attorney Casagrande answers, just so you understand, the reason I'm asking is I'm just questioning whether or not it would be wise to have so many days after a decision in case there's a timetable where the council may do something which would therefore conflict with the zoning commission, which may cause a quagmire as to what do we do, where all of a sudden an application is turned in, but the city council took something to override a decision of the zoning commission. I wouldn't want to open up a scenario where that type of a conflict would occur. So with that was my explanation for the question, and Attorney Casagrande, just so you understand where I was coming from with that.
Thank you, Commissioner Malillo. Welcome, Attorney Casagrande and Attorney Edwards. Good to see you, and thank you for coming in tonight. Attorney Casagrande, did you want to comment on
Yeah, if I may,
Chairman?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Miller, could you just rephrase the question? I want to make sure I understand it.
Sure, let me ask it this way. Hypothetically speaking, the zoning commission approves Ms. Calicho's second regulation on the second petition on the agenda tonight. We approve it in August, and then in September, would the or in August, could the city council have it at a special meeting pass something which would therefore override or conflict with the sale of that item, in which case would cause a quagmire because we would approve something, the moratorium would end, and all of a sudden the zoning department could start accepting applications, but then the city council did something which may therefore cause a quirk in there. That's just the whole question. So I guess really, does the city council have a role to play when it comes to marijuana decisions in the city of Danbury?
The answer is the statute does give a legislative body of the municipality a role, but I have been asked to give an opinion on this as early as a year ago. And the bottom line is that the statute, the Public Act, says that a municipality can choose to regulate cannabis establishments by ordinance or zoning regulation. The charter, when you look at the charter of the city, however, and this is just my opinion, the charter makes it clear that the zoning commission is the duly elected body with the authority to enact zoning regulations under Chapter 124 of the general statutes. And therefore, my opinion, which I've shared with the mayor and Sharon and others, is that I believe that the regulatory power under the scheme of the city's charter properly belongs with the zoning commission. And I have not heard anything that would lead me to believe that the city council intends to take any action at this point. The nightmare scenario is you adopt this, and then the city council tries to, adopt an ordinance that conflicts with it or prohibits it. I don't have an answer for you on that. The statute is just not clear on what happens if there's competing, attempts at jurisdiction between the city council and the zoning commission. So I don't want to speculate on that, but the bottom line is, in my opinion, the charter properly reserves the power to regulate cannabis establishments to the zoning commission because it is a zoning regulation.
Okay, so if I understand what you're saying correctly, Attorney Casagrande, is because it would, as a land use scenario, for example, like a package store, we would give permission, we allow package stores to exist in the city of Danbury as a usage, and that's an allowed sale. So if we adopt the regulations, therefore allowing cannabis retail centers to be an allowed land use, hypothetically speaking, though, the city council could pass an ordinance making the sale of cannabis illegal in the city of Danbury, even though we would allow it as an allowed land use?
Well, I'm not sure the council would have that authority, but there's another provision in the Public Act that says upon a petition of 10% of the voters, a referendum shall be held in the city on whether to, and I think there's 3 questions that the voters would be asked. Should we prohibit marijuana in the city? Should we regulate it? And should we impose restrictions on it? If that, and again, that requires a 10% petition no later than 60 days before the next general election. If that petition were filed and it was proper and it went to the referendum, and I addressed this in my opinion letter, if it went to a referendum and the voters decided there shall be no cannabis establishments in Danbury, at least recreational cannabis establishments, in my opinion, that would nullify the zoning commission's action. So it's more of a question of, can the voters override it? In my opinion, and I think Councilman Levy said it right when he said that this is not a model of clarity. There's a lot of ambiguities in the statute. But in my opinion, the voters could
override the zoning commission's decision to adopt a regulation regulating cannabis establishments if it went to a referendum and it passed.
Okay, so hypothetically speaking, in the scenario, then, should the moratorium end on the election, after the election day, to allow that in case? I mean, I'm just thinking the way the language is, the moratorium could end on July 29th, 2023, or should it be after the November election in 2022? Because theoretically, if a decision is made 60 days prior to the election and there's a petition done, there could be a referendum question on the November ballot, in which case we would have, we may find ourselves in that scenario where a decision is being challenged, and we may be setting in place a use that may not be allowed. My whole question is really just as to the proper date of the ending of the moratorium after action taken by this commission prior to July 29th, 2023.
So I guess let me answer it this way. I think that's ultimately a policy decision that you have to make as a commission. Should we make it the moratorium, effective at some point after the November 22 election, or should we make it for a year? But again, I will say that if there is a referendum and the referendum says no cannabis establishments in Danbury, the moratorium essentially becomes moot.
Right, but my concern is if, let's say, for example, it was authorized in August, paperwork was generated, and all of a sudden we have the possibility of a potential center looking to open up prior to the election, and all of a sudden the election makes that nullified. I'm just concerned as to what type of a legal quagmire that might evolve into.
I think you chose the right word. It's a quagmire, and I don't want to speculate as to an outcome.
Ms. Calitro, do you have any thoughts on that, or is it just?
While we're on that subject, let me ask Attorney Casagrande this. So if you're saying that the voters can offer up a referendum, that's just not the year of enactment. That could be at any election, right? So this can happen 3 years, 5 years, 7 years from now?
I believe that's correct.
Yeah, so what difference does it make?
But I was just thinking regarding the end date of the moratorium. That's why I said November 2022 election date and not 2023, because the moratorium would end in July regardless. But the whole purpose for the moratorium is to buy this commission time. There may be people out there, I was thinking the city council, but a group or something along those lines that's waiting to see what we do. And that's why I was just looking to see if what Attorney Casagrande said, it would be something that would be done at the November election. And that's why I suggested the moratorium ending. My concern is whether or not the date of action, or if there should be a time frame after the date of action that the moratorium would end, just to allow that concern to play out.
Thank you. Ms. Calitro, I jumped in before you were gonna.
No, that's okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, deferring to legal counsel, the petition is for a year, or again, earlier action of the zoning commission. If something were to occur relative to that referendum, it would just make that year, end sooner, pursuant to the law.
Yeah.
So what difference does it net, what difference does it make? If that happens, it's over anyway. And again, I think we'd have to kind of figure out, because it is very, there's a lot of questions relative to, what happens if the question passes and you have regulations in place. Does it allow you to regulate it, or just is it free for all? We just don't know the answer to those questions. But I don't think it harms us or you or the city in any way, shape, or form to extend it for a year. And then if something overrides it, it just happens. It ends sooner, I guess, is my point.
Then I just have one last follow-up then. Correct me if I'm thinking correctly. we as a commission can set an enactment date on a petition that we approve or regulation that we make. Our initial thing we adopted is upon publication in the standard one, but perhaps I don't know if it would behoove us down the road if we're with the other petition, if at that point in time we wanted to say give a 60-day enactment date or something along those lines, that we could actually make in that motion, and that might be the appropriate way that this is handled. I don't know.
Again, your action is, Mr. Chairman, through the chair, your action occurs on the night you make the action. You just set the effective date, which is what we do at the beginning of every year. Usually the date following publication or as specified, but when you act, you act.
Right. Yeah, not my point though was the effective date would buy a little bit of time to clean up an issue that could potentially arise. And maybe that's not the purview of the moratorium, but maybe on the other petition, that would be where that conversation should occur.
Potentially, yeah. I would just say, again, in support of the petition that staff submitted, this allows you some time to figure out if the second petition is worded the way you want it, or you're comfortable with it after we've been through the whole analysis. It gives you some time, it keeps the status quo until anything changes, whether it's a petition of the voters or an action on the second petition. Keeps everything status quo until that time.
Thank you all. Mr. Queller, did you have your hand raised for a second? I'm sorry. Yes, Ms. Calitra, I think the bottom line here is this is a unique petition because all those in favor of your next petition and all those opposed to your next petition should all be in agreement to just approve the moratorium to give us some breathing room to study, because technically, if we don't make a decision on your second petition this evening, and we don't make it on the next meeting, but we make it on the following, without a moratorium, we lose by 11 days. So, it's math. 2 + 2 is always equal 4.
Yeah, I again, as staff to the zoning commission and an official of the town, I would ask that respectfully that you do the most conservative thing and keep everything the same until you've made an informed decision on the second petition that's in front of you.
Thank
you. Let's not risk something falling through some crack that we haven't yet decided or determined how wide it is yet.
Thank you. Commission members, anything else of Ms. Calitro? I don't see hands, and I see people saying I have nothing else by shaking their heads. So I would look for a motion to close this public hearing. There's a motion to close the public hearing. Commission members?
I move to close the public hearing.
It's a motion made by Commissioner David to close the public hearing. Mr. Coelho is seconding that. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? I heard Ms. Hylinski's mic, so it's working. So for the record, this was a unanimous decision to close the public hearing. And I did not hear or see any no votes. So what I'd actually like to do is to see if we can get a motion to move this to old business for discussion of possible action.
Mr. Chairman, I was just going to offer that motion to move this item to number 1 under old business.
Commissioner Malillo, great minds think alike. Thank you. Is there a second? Who's that second? I didn't see it. Mr. Jowdy, second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? I did not see any hands in the negative or hear any. Also, let me try your minds at this, since we're on a roll, it appears. The next petition has a potential of going hours. I don't know. This one here went an hour, and it contains some information on the next petition. So I'm wondering if anybody's interested in making a motion to deviate from the agenda and move the old business for discussion of possible action up now and get the moratorium decided, and then go right to the second public hearing this evening. Anybody in the mood?
I move so.
So there's a motion. There's a motion by Commissioner David to deviate from our agenda, our printed agenda, and go to the old business for discussion of possible action. And there's a second by Mr. Jowdy, did I see?
Yes.
Thank you. Commission members, anybody want to discuss it? Not seeing any. A yes is yes, a no is no. All those in favor of the motion to move, deviate from the agenda, go to old business for discussion of possible action, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed to that? I did not see or hear, so that's unanimous. So let us now go to the first petition this evening under old business for discussion of possible action. It's a petition of Sharon B. Calitro, Planning Director, to amend Section 10J of the zoning regulations, in parentheses, extend temporary moratorium on acceptance of applications, amendments, petitions, and issuance of zoning approvals for or related to cannabis establishments for 1 year or upon future action of the zoning commission, whichever date comes first. Public hearing was heard on July 12th, 2022. It was closed on July 12th, 2022. Today being July 12th, 2022, we're now hearing it under old business for discussion, possible action. Commission members.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Commissioner Melillo.
I'll make a motion to approve this petition for the reason that approval of this petition will extend the moratorium should a decision by the zoning commission on another petition currently under consideration not occur prior to the current expiration date of July 29th, 2022, or if said petition is denied. This would allow the commission to assess cannabis establishment uses within the city of Danbury and determine the most appropriate regulatory framework for said uses.
Thank you, Commissioner Melillo. Commission members, there's a motion with reason by Commissioner Melillo to approve the moratorium petition. Is there a second?
Hylinski seconds it.
Thank you, Commissioner Hylinski. Second by Commissioner Hylinski. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? It's unanimous. I did not see or hear any.
Point of
Mr.
order,
Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
In
Yeah,
fact, I
Mr.
want to do a roll.
I
Yeah,
was
thank
gonna say,
you.
I believe
I want to
it's
do a roll
supposed to be
call. I just
vote.
realized that.
Thank you.
Yes, definitely. So there's a motion by Commissioner Melillo, second by Commissioner Jowdy to approve, and we're going to do a roll call. A yes is yes, a no is no. Commissioner Melillo.
Second was, I'm going to vote yes, but the second was by Commissioner Hylinski, not by
Oh.
Commissioner Jowdy.
I'm sorry,
Correct.
Commissioner Hylinski. Sorry.
No problem.
Thank you, Commissioner Melillo. Commissioner Melillo,
Yes.
Commissioner Hylinski,
Yes.
Commissioner Coelho,
Yes.
Commissioner David,
Yes.
Commissioner Fay,
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley,
Yes.
Commissioner Jowdy,
Yes.
Commissioner Rhea,
Yes.
and I will vote yes. So a roll call shows that it's unanimous, 9-0. So the moratorium petition is approved. So let us now go to the second petition this evening. It's a petition of Sharon B. Calitro, Planning Director, to amend sections 2B, 3C4, 5A, 2B, 5A5, 5B, 2B, 5B5, 6A, 2B, 6B, 2B, 8C, 4C, 10J, 11B2, 11B3, the zoning regulations, in parentheses, amendments to clarify definitions of cannabis establishments, allow and regulate specific adult use cannabis establishments in specified zoning districts, establish a parking requirement, and prohibit issuance of variances for said cannabis uses. So I've been reading and doing paperwork. Let me find that pile. And I think I found it. Let me begin with, I have it right here. Let me begin with the Planning Commission recommendation. July 7, 2022, to Theodore J. Haddad Jr., Chairman, Danbury Zoning Commission, from Arnold Finaldi Jr., Chairman, Danbury Planning Commission, regarding 8-3A referral petition of Sharon B. Calitro, Planning Director, to amend sections 2B, 3C4, 5A, 2B, 5A5, 5B, 2B, 5B5, 6A, 2B, 6B, 2B, 8C, 4C, 10J, 11B2, and 11B3 of the zoning regulations. Amendments to clarify definitions of cannabis establishments, allow and regulate specific adult use cannabis establishments in specified zoning districts. establish a parking requirement, and prohibit issuance of variances for said cannabis uses. At the web-based Zoom meeting held on June 15, 2022, the City of Danbury Planning Commission voted to give the above referenced petition a positive recommendation for the following reasons. The proposed amendments provide for the establishment of a limited number of specific cannabis establishment uses in Danbury, with associated regulations and regulations that will protect the public health, safety, and welfare. The motion to give this a positive recommendation was made by Mr. Sylvain, seconded by Mr. Chioccio, and passed by voice vote with 5 ayes from Mr. Chioccio, Mrs. Hofstadter, Mr. Sylvain, Mr. Haas, and Chairman Finaldi. So I tried to say specified 4 times so far tonight. Hopefully, and I tripped on it. So hopefully I don't know the 5th. Additionally, we do have some correspondence, 83B from Westcog, their recommendation. They were requested by Ms. Reed, planning assistant, and their answer was the opinion of Westcog staff is that the proposal is of local interest and with minimal intermunicipal impact. Therefore, it is not being forwarded to adjacent municipalities, and the regional staff is making no comment. Let me now go to Ms. Calitro, if you would, regarding the staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
So you all have copies of the June 9th, 2022 staff report, which I prepared. And I'm actually going to walk you through the regulation kind of page by page, section by section. The staff report was kind of more of a summary of it. Let me just clarify. I realized I did make a mistake on the sales tax potential for the city, which is contained in my staff report, and that I had noted in that we would be able to collect an additional 6%. It's actually 3%, and I'll talk you through that. But what I want to do is actually walk you through the regulation, again, section by section, so you can understand how it was formulated, what the thought process was. So I'm not going to read the staff report verbatim. It is in the record and it's part of the official file. If that's okay with you, Mr. Chairman. So we drafted, let me go back a year ago. I know I said this before, but for this public hearing and for the record, a year ago, after the Responsible and Equitable Regulation of Adult Use Cannabis Act was passed by the state of Connecticut, we proposed regulations which was in 2 parts. Number 1, and as you know, our zoning regulations are permissive, which means if the land use is not specifically noted in the zoning regulations, it is prohibited. So we went through and we utilized the definitions that were contained in the act relative to what uses were cannabis establishments, and we defined those in section 2B of the regulations. And at the same time, we established and proposed the moratorium language, which was adopted and now has been extended. So that's where we were a year ago. We had also regulations in place which allowed 2 medical dispensaries in the city of Danbury in specific zones, subject to additional use requirements. So now we have a new law that's in place. We've defined these uses. We gave ourselves a year to figure out kind of what everything meant. And we spent a lot of time doing research, looking at what other municipalities are doing. And I proposed and proposed to you in May of this year what we felt was kind of the most conservative approach should the commission want to enter into the adult use or the recreational marijuana arena. Again, let's remember, the commission, the city already allowed medical sales. So this was just an add-on for the potential for recreational sales and or some growing use. And when I thought about how to do it, we took a lot of time. I kept writing at the top of my drafts, marijuana is it's still a Schedule I drug, hasn't been changed. I understand that, the enforcement is a different issue. It still remains a Schedule I drug. There's no Safe Banking Act. There's differences between land uses or licenses that require a pharmacist on site versus those that don't. In other words, a medical dispensary requires a licensed pharmacist to be on site at all times, and a retail facility is just a retail facility that sells cannabis. We also focused only on those uses. There are a number of licenses which the state has the ability to issue. We basically focused on those uses, again, as we had defined previously, that would generate some revenue for the city of Danbury. And those uses being the recreational retail sale, the hybrid, which is the medical. It's a facility that has medical and rec sales, but you only get the additional 3% on the rec sales, and the micro cultivators. So we didn't open it up to every use. Why? We really think our position is, if we're going to go into this arena, let's start small, right? So that was kind of the approach that we took in formulating these regulations. You'll also see we posted additional information on the agenda. We got some comments from Attorney Mizuko, and he had some commentary on the proposed distance requirements. And again, his arguments being that we can only regulate certain uses that were noted in RERACA and referenced from the statutes in 30-46. We don't agree with that, and I'm going to go through that later on. And I will address all the comments I believe that we've gotten on this. But let me walk you through what we did and then answer any questions. So I'm going to start on the definition section. Again, last year we defined what a cannabis establishment was and all the uses. So we took a look at each of those uses, and we proposed some changes to them, and they really basically centered around the fact that the state issues a license to a person. We don't regulate land use based on a person. We regulate land uses. What is the facility? What is the structure? What is the land being used for? So we went back in, and in almost every one of these definitions, instead of saying for instance, a cannabis cultivator is a person that is licensed by the state, we said a facility in which there is a person licensed by the state. Again, trying to be consistent with the rest of our zoning regulations. We also made some changes in almost every, I think in every definition to account for the fact that DCP, which is the Department of Consumer Protection, who is now the licensing board or a department for the state, may not be that in that role in the future. So we wanted to account for the fact that they may assign the duties for the licensing out of DCP to some other state sanctioned licensing board or department. So we went into, for instance, the cannabis establishment definition, and we added words like shall be licensed by DCP pursuant to the special act, or other department or licensing board as may be sanctioned by the state. And so we added those words basically to every definition that we have in our regulations. With respect to the cannabis cultivator, in addition to adding those words, a facility in which there is a person and or department or licensing board, we also put in a prohibition that a cannabis cultivator, should we allow it, now again, I'm not proposing that we do, and I'll get to that, would have to occur, the growing would have to occur indoors. And what does that do? That protects us from farms. I'm not sure we're ready to have, land be open farming for cannabis yet. We may never be, but at the moment, so I added the words indoors within an establishment. And that has to do with cannabis cultivators. The delivery service, again, a facility in which there's a person that's licensed by the state and or licensing board. The same for a cannabis dispensary facility, which is AKA what we know as the marijuana dispensary facility on the medical side of things. The same language we add for the cannabis food and beverage manufacturer, the cannabis hybrid retailer, again, a facility in which there is a person that is licensed by the state DCP or the other department or licensing board that may be sanctioned by the state. And then when we get down to micro cultivator, again, we made some changes to that. So a micro cultivator is a small growing facility. And it is 2,000 to not more than 10,000 square feet. And under the state regulations can be expanded by the commissioner up to 25,000 square feet in size. And so in this regulation, we proposed to delete that and said, basically keep it at 10,000 square feet. Again, we don't know much about this yet. This is all new everywhere in Connecticut. So the commissioner might, DCP might allow it to grow up to a certain point in time, but it was our position that let's keep it small and see how we do. Again, we added words that, the growing has to occur with indoors within a fully enclosed building that will protect us against farms, and that the micro cultivator shall not sell directly to consumers from the facility. So let me explain. A micro cultivator, we would collect the additional 3% tax because micro cultivators are allowed to sell to consumers. What we don't want to happen is this become a retail facility. If we're characterizing this kind of as a growing manufacturing facility, then let them go deliver to consumers, but not sell directly out of what we think is more like an industrial facility. So we added that language that they shall not sell directly to consumers from the facility. They are allowed, again, from their license from the state to deliver and sell from their own employees or a delivery service. We just don't want people coming to their facility and buying it there. That to me is more like a retail facility and not a grower. So we added language relative to that. I should also say for the record, I did look at, for instance, Worcester, Mass limits a micro cultivator to 5,000 square feet in size. So, we didn't just pick things out of the air. We tried to look at what was going on in states around us. The cannabis producer and manufacturer, product packager, retailer, cannabis transporter. These are all, again, uses that we had already defined, and what we're proposing to do is refine that so that we add the words a facility in which there is a person that's sanctioned, that's licensed by the state or another department or board that's sanctioned to issue those licenses. So I think those are kind of sort of pretty innocuous changes relative overall. Again, there's no new license definitions. They all existed in our zoning regulations as of last year. Okay, section 3 of the district regulations. So that is where the medical marijuana dispensary and production facilities, we didn't allow production facilities, so that was prohibited, but we did allow, as of several years ago, the medical marijuana dispensary. And that, so we're proposing to delete those, which is how you see it's all crossed out, and instead have proposed the new regulations under 3C4. And basically, again, we've said the cannabis establishments allowed in the city of Danbury shall include the following, and I'll walk you through them. A cannabis dispensary facility, which is what we all know previously as the medical sales. So you need a card, you have a licensed pharmacist there. So cannabis dispensary facilities, a cannabis hybrid retailer, which is a facility where you could do medical sales and recreational sales. Cannabis retailer is just recreational sales, and the cannabis micro cultivators. Those are the small growers under, as we now have proposed to be defined, 10,000 square feet. So a small 10,000 square foot building in which you're growing the plants and selling them, obviously. So those are the 4 uses proposed to be allowed, and they're subject to all these additional use requirements. And then any other establishment, cannabis establishment that we've defined, and I went through all those, product packager and transporter and all those other uses are prohibited. Again, our zoning regulations are permissive. Unless they're allowed in the zone, they are prohibited. So we're starting off small. We're not conservative. We're not allowing every single use. I'm saying, let's see how it goes. Let's see if we collect some tax revenue and can do some things good for the community. Again, the law says we can only spend those revenues on certain things. I'd be happy to answer any of those questions as well. One of which has to do with education programs, streetscape improvements, mental health and addiction services, youth services. There's 6 or so things that the law says we can spend that money on. So let's start out conservatively. And the way I approached this section was to look at those individual uses and see how many we want to allow, where we want to allow them, and what additional use restrictions we should be placing on them. Really no different than how we consider special exception uses, special permit uses, and they have additional conditions. So first, in A, cannabis establishments, again, only those 4 that we talked about. The dispensary, which is the medical, the hybrid, which is medical and retail, the retail and the retail is straight retail, and the small growers. Allowed herein shall be considered special excepted uses subject to all the provisions in section 10C and otherwise provide in these regulations. So even though the zoning allows it, they have to go to the planning commission. And there is a process and there's certain requirements that have to be met in order to obtain the special exception. They're all special exception uses, number 1. That's in A. B, cannabis establishments shall only be permitted as principal uses and not be allowed as an accessory use to any other permitted special exception or special permit use. Why? Because I don't think we need the layering of the uses. We're just not very familiar with how anything works. So you want to have one of the 4 cannabis establishments, that's the only principal use. You can't say, I'm going to go in and be a retailer and be accessory to some other use. I just think that we're not ready for that. And C, only 1 cannabis establishment shall be located in the facility. Why? And I'm going to give you an example. If you were a bakery and the bakery wants to make brownies, but they also want to make cannabis brownies, right? I think there's, again, we're still dealing with what the feds define as a Schedule 1 drug. And if somebody wants to make cannabis brownies and we want to let them make cannabis brownies, go make cannabis brownies in a facility that only makes cannabis brownies. Don't mix it up with regular brownies. And I guess that's kind of the easiest way to explain it. So 1 cannabis establishment within a facility. D, all section, so I'm reading from 3C4D. All Connecticut state regulations and laws, including state licensing requirements, shall be adhered to and form the basis for the local regulation. It's pretty straightforward. Cannabis dispensaries, E. Hybrid retailers, cannabis retailers shall be allowed subject to requirements of this section and the following additional use restrictions. So these are the specific things related to those 3 uses. So I'm in E1 if you're following along. So in the city of Danbury, again, we're trying to start very small and see how it goes. There shall be operating no more than either 2 cannabis hybrid retailers. So again, a retailer sells medical and recreational. So you can have 2 of those, or you can have a combination of 1 cannabis dispensary, which is a medical, 1 hybrid, which does both, and 1 cannabis retailer. And in effect, those are both the same things. 2 hybrids is the same as the 1, 1, and 1. So that is all that would be allowed to start with. And where those three cannabis establishments would be allowed is in number 2, what shall only be permitted in the CA 80 and CG 20 zoning districts. Now let's remember that we already allowed the medical subject to additional use regulations and the prohibition on rec in the CG 20 and CA 80. So we're not venturing far from what was already allowed in the regulations. Okay, E3, vehicular access onto the lot upon which is located this dispensary, the hybrid retailer or the retailer, shall be provided solely from a collector or arterial street. You've heard that regulation before. We don't want these things in our, in our local roads. Keep it to the main roads, the collector or arterial. If number 4, cannabis dispensary facilities, hybrid retailers, and cannabis retailers shall operate only between the hours of Monday through Saturday, 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. and on Sundays from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. So RERAC allows us to regulate the hours. We think it's appropriate in terms of the protection of the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens. This is a new use. And again, the legislature allowed us to do that under the law. And we've taken into consideration kind of the rush hour on those arterial and collector roads. And we did look at other communities and hours of operation when they were open. And 5, the distance requirements for dispensaries. Now I've broken out the distance requirements for dispensaries, which again are the medical, versus the hybrid retailers and the hybrids and the regular retailers, and then the micro cultivators. So they're all kind of separate in terms of their distance requirements. And there's a reason for that. So I'm going to walk you through them as well. So for the dispensary, which is the medical, no dispensary shall be located within 500 feet of a municipal building, park, public recreation area, licensed adult or daycare center, dependency treatment center, shelter for the homeless, transitional housing facility, which is again a defined use, place of worship. And then we told you how to measure the distance. Now, as some of you might remember from several years ago, there was some legal challenge to how we measured things and inconsistency. And so I went back and tried to be as clear as possible. And so the distance shall be measured in a straight line from the nearest legal parcel boundary line of the land used for said purpose, which would be, in that case, a public park. So 500 feet from the land on a park to the main pedestrian entrance of the dispensary. Not very much different than what's in our medical regs today, or I should say before today, before this new law was in effect. And we just added some uses to the list of uses. Again, and I'll go back through Attorney Mizuko's comments relative to that. In B, no cannabis dispensary. Again, this is just the medical facility allowed within 1,000 feet of any nursery, pre-kindergarten, kindergarten, elementary school. These are the schools, charitable organizations. It's measured, again, lot line, a straight line from the nearest legal parcel boundary line of the land use for said purposes. So the parcel boundary line of the school to the entrance of the facility. That's how you measure. It's a point to point. It's not, up and around and how you walk and things like that. Again, similar to what exists today. And then we added in no cannabis dispensary facility located within 500 feet of a school bus stop. So the distance, again, shall be measured in a straight line from the nearest parcel boundary line of the land used for the dispensary to the bus stop. And so why is that measured a little bit different than the other two? And that is because if you have a very deep lot, for instance, and the entrance and the building is set back on the lot, you could actually have the bus stop right in front of the lot. So we wanted to kind of take into account what could possibly, occur when kids get off the bus and people are handling marijuana or cannabis. So those are the distance requirements for the cannabis dispensary. The distance requirements for the hybrid retailer or the straight retailer are 1,000 feet from a municipal building, public park, recreation area, adult daycare, dependency treatment center. Again, the distance measured in a straight line from the nearest legal parcel boundary line of the land use for said purpose to the main pedestrian entrance, measured the same way as the other one. The hybrid retailer in B, retailer or the cannabis retailer, not located within 1,000 feet of a school, again, measured the same way, lot line to the entrance of the facility. No cannabis retailer or hybrid retailer located within 500 feet of a school bus stop, again, measured the same way as I just explained. And then there's an additional requirement if you are a hybrid or a retailer. Again, these are the two that sell adult recreational use marijuana. So there's an additional distance requirement. So the nearest legal parcel boundary line of the land proposed to be used for either the hybrid retailer or the cannabis retailer shall be no closer than 200 feet from any residential zoning district boundary. And why is that? Because that's our residential zones. And the sensitive nature of the use in our residential zones warrants some additional protection. There are other municipalities, I believe I have the regs for, I think, East Hartford with me that have the similar or even a less distance requirement. So we thought it was important that there be a distance requirement, not just from sensitive land uses, but from our residential zones, that, you know, to protect the public health, welfare, and safety. That was something important to consider. And then in F, we went to, so I'm in 4C4F. We deal with the cannabis microcultivators. Again, those are the small growers, and they are subject to the additional use regulations that I've defined or I proposed below. The state of Connecticut is issuing 4 microcultivator licenses, 4. So I proposed in this first round 4. At no time in the city shall there be approved or operating more than 1. Well, why? Well, if the state's only going to approve 4 at the get-go, why do we need more than 1 in Danbury? We really don't. We're not going to get the mark. You know, it's highly unlikely that you're going to get more than 1 if they're only issuing 4 to cover the entire state. So again, let's start out small, see if there's any appetite for this. And if there is, does it work? Are we comfortable with it before we allow more than 1? So it's 1 small grower between 2 and 10,000 square feet, indoors only. That's what a microcultivator is. They, again, remember, they grow it, they can package it. They can also sell, which is how the city ends up collecting the revenue from it. But we've said in the definition, they can't sell at that facility. They would have to deliver it using a delivery service or one of their employees, which they're allowed to do under the state license. So only 1. And a microcultivator is only permitted in the IL40 and IG80 zoning districts. Why? Because it's like a manufacturing use. It's not any different than our other industrial uses. It belongs in an industrial zone. In 3, microcultivators considered an industrial use for the purpose of calculating the required number of off-street parking spaces pursuant to Section 8C4 of the regulations. Why is that important? Because if you don't say it, then we have to kind of figure out which parking regulation applies. So it's better for us to be specific about that. And again, in the previous uses that I discussed, I actually have a parking requirement for it, which is why you don't see it there. And I'll get to that in a second. And then there are distance requirements for the cannabis microcultivators. It's 1,000 feet from the municipal building, public park, public recreation area, adult. These are exactly the same as we indicated before: licensed adult and daycare center, dependency treatment center, shelter, transitional housing facility, place of worship. It's measured lot line of the legal parcel boundary line of that use to the entrance of the facility. Exactly the same as we had it before. Again, for the cannabis micro cultivator, shall not be located within 1,000 feet of any school, university, secondary school, charitable organization, or offices thereof, measured from the lot line of that use to the entrance of the facility. C, micro cultivator shall be located within shall not be located within 1,000 feet of a school bus stop, measured the same way as I previously indicated. And then we added in for the grower that the legal parcel boundary line proposed for the cultivator shall be no closer than 1,000 feet from any residential zoning district. Why? Again, we're trying to protect nearby residential zones. So we made the distance a little bit further. And I know that Attorney Mizuko is going to make some comments relative to that. So I just wanted to add, Joanne, I can screen share, right? I wanted to add into the record so that the commission can see the legislative intent as we understand it, because we did obviously do some research on our ability to regulate from different land uses. So I'm going to add for the record, this is testimony from Mohit Agrawal, who's the Deputy Policy Director for the Office of the Governor on a Casio, and which is Connecticut ZEO and Connecticut chapter of the American Planning Association legislative wrap-up session that they did last July right after this. And when Mohit was asked a specific question, and let me see if I can scroll to it, of whether or not those are the only uses for which you can regulate distance from, he said, and here his initials, I'll read it. He said, yeah, that's a good question. And again, the question was, were those the only uses? And he said, yeah, that's a good question. That's an example. That section, we went through that subject section, went through many rounds of rewriting. And at one point it was written to where to require it, and they got back some pushback about how to measure it. And he said, we wanted to put that in as an example. We would suggest to municipalities that those be at a minimum the kinds of areas around which you would put some kind of buffer, but we wanted to leave the discretion to the towns. So that is not an exhaustive list. So again, for those of you who might have read Attorney Mizuko's comments relative to our ability to provide for regulation and distance requirements for things other than what was in 30-46 of the statutes, which was what was referenced in RERACA. This was the policy director for the Office of the Governor who was involved in the writing of the statute. What he said, we did not mean this to be an exhaustive list. So I think it goes to the legislative intent, and I'll submit that as Exhibit 1 for the record. Okay, continuing along. So those were the distance requirements. And in G, again, we're going to go back to just general requirements for the 4 cannabis uses which we are proposing to be allowed. No lot upon which a cannabis establishment shall be closer than 1 mile from a lot upon which there is another cannabis establishment. And having thought about this a little bit after we submitted, I would be amenable to, and I would suggest a potential amendment that we just indicate that how the distance is measured, because I don't want anybody to say, well, you said, how do you measure the distance? And all those things, and you didn't say how you measure the distance, that you have to be a mile, one lot has to be a mile from another lot. So I would propose that we just add in the distances measured from the nearest legal parcel boundary line of 1 lot in a straight line to the other lot. I mean, it's fairly consistent. Obviously, it's consistent. H, signage complies with our existing regulations in 8E and the requirements of the state DCP. And I can just tell you that their signage requirements for issuance of a license and all their monitoring are pretty specific and highly regulated. So I think we're protected there. And I, site lighting, including lighting on the cannabis establishment, shall comply with section 8C7 of the regulations. In other words, they can't throw light, on adjacent properties and things like that. J, refuse areas for cannabis establishments shall be screened from view pursuant to section 3G6 of the regulations. And those are our standard regulations. And we added in that the refuse areas and the containers shall be locked to prevent unauthorized entrance. Why? Because who knows who's garbage diving these days for anything. So we ought to take some additional precautions. K, off-street loading spaces for cannabis establishments shall comply with 8C5 of the regulations, which is our standard. L, no portion, KL, no portion of any cannabis establishments use shall be located in the same building or any portion thereof used for residential purposes. Why? Because as I think we all know, cannabis use permeates walls. So if you're an apartment above a store, that could be a nuisance and problematic. So we just thought that this protects the residential uses from any potential impacts of a cannabis establishment. And cannabis establishments shall not be permitted on lots which whole or in part border on Main Street, State Route 53 in Danbury. I know Councilman Perkins had a question and a comment about that. It's not the staff's opinion that that is the best use on Main Street in Danbury. And that's the answer to that. And no cannabis establishment may be accessed by a drive-in or drive-through facility by which a cannabis product in any form is dispensed to patrons within motor vehicles. I think we've been through this situation Sunday. It just opens the door, particularly in the CA80 zone, about fast food restaurants and things like that. So let's stick to what we have, which is there's no drive-throughs, no drive-through windows. No cannabis shall be applied, ingested, consumed inside or on the premises of a cannabis dispensary, hybrid retailer, cannabis retailer, or a cannabis microcultivator. I am 99.9% sure, again, having gone back to the RERACA statutes, you can't do that anyway, but let's just say it. So everybody's sure that, it can't be smoking it, drinking it, eating it, if assuming again, it's allowed outside on the premises or in the premises. And then in P, if you just give me a second, Mr. Chairman, just got to get some water. In P, and the subsections thereof, they really have to do with the site plan requirements that would be required with the petition for the grant of special exception. As you know, when you apply for a special exception, you have to submit a site plan. So we have some additional provisions in there relative to these 4 uses. Number 1, you can't get a waiver to site plan. So what is a waiver? Sometimes when people come in and want to change land uses and they're not making any change in the site plan, but they want to go from a barber shop to a tattoo parlor. Again, our regs are very specific. So if you want to go from one use to another, you're not doing anything different. You get a waiver to site plan requirements. You don't have to submit, you don't have to go through that process. I don't think that should apply. Again, these are new uses, not being allowed in many communities in the state of Connecticut. Let's not give anybody necessarily an out to begin with. If we don't have a problem later in the future, we can look to make any changes. But I think we ought to know what's going in every place. And so you wouldn't be allowed to get a waiver to that. 2, all transfers of ownership or license issued by the state of Connecticut Department of Consumer Protection shall also require special exception site plan approval from the Planning Commission. So we've read Attorney Mizuko's comments relative to that, and I'm sure he will go through them later. But again, I would offer an amendment to that, which I think addresses some of his concerns. I'm going to share some revised text. And again, I'm not going to speak for him. I'm sure he'll speak later. He had some concerns about public companies and changes of ownership in public companies. And do they have to come back and get a special exception and go through the entire process if they change 1/10 of an ownership of a company? So we considered that, and let me just bring up some text. So what I propose instead is, so you'll see that's what P2 says now. All transfers of ownership or license issued by the state of Connecticut, DCP, shall also require special exception and site plan approval from the Planning Commission. So instead, I think if we wanted to consider this alternative language, I'm fine with this, and the attorneys, Katsgrandi or Edwards, can opine about whether it's a substantive change. I don't think so at all. So we said for all transfers of the state issued existing license or a new license, which does not result in a change in the site plan of the underlying special exception approval, again, no changes, the transferee shall provide written notification of the state approval of the transfer to the Planning Commission. Why? Because I think we ought to know who's operating what, right? This is a brand new regulatory forum from the state level. We should just know who we're dealing with. So if you're not making any changes to the site plan, you have to notify the Planning Commission. Notify. I'm not saying you have to get a new special exception. That notification shall be provided no later than 15 days after approval of license transfer or issuance. Let us know within 2 weeks. I think that's pretty fair. The notification shall include the following: a written statement on a form provided by the commission, signed by the transferee, stating that the transferee has reviewed the applicable regulations and the terms and conditions of the granted special exception and site plan approval, and agrees to be bound thereby. That way, the new people, say they transfer it from Sharon LLC to Robin LLC, sorry, Robin, I'm using it as an example, they ought to recognize, we got a grant, these are the conditions, these are everything I need to be bound by, I agree to it. We're just asking for confirmation, affirmation of that. And then to give us a copy of the final license to the transferee to operate their establishment that's issued to them from the state. And then we said, if a bond or other security obligation is in place, the transferee shall also submit proof acceptable to the commission that the transferee has assumed the obligation and shall provide a substitute security as may be acceptable to the commission. Again, if they got special exception site plan approval and then they sold it or transferred it to somebody else, but they didn't do the required improvements for which they have now bonded those improvements. We want the new person to give us a bond and they're not changing anything. Somebody needs to be responsible for those improvements, and that should be the new person. I think that's fair. And then we said any changes in the site plan shall be governed by section 10D7. Those are our existing regulations. Note, if you change the site plan and you trip a threshold, you have to go back to the Planning Commission. That's what happens today. That's what would happen under the scenario that something changes. But if nothing changes, and I think this might address, I hope it addresses, we believe it addresses Attorney Mizuko's comments related to this. Just, you got to let us know who you are. You got to agree to be bound by the terms and conditions of the approval, and you got to give us your license so we know you actually got a license from the state. I think this is fair and reasonable, so I would offer that up as an amendment to subsection P2. Okay, let me stop sharing for a second. Okay. P3, all applications must include the provisional license issued by the state. Yes, we want to know that the state, you've made it through at least the provisional round before we, start doing everything at the town level, at the city level. And then 4, how are we going to, 4 addresses, how are we going to ensure on a mapping level and a certification that you've actually met all those distance requirements. And this is exactly the text that's in the regulations relative to package stores. So again, it's pretty much verbatim, and I know Attorney Mizuko has some comments relative to the map size and the scale of the map, and he submitted that in a letter that showed up on the agenda, and I believe we'll address it later on. But again, let me just, for the record, oh no, where's my maps? Just give me 1 second. I had the maps open. Okay, can everybody see that? Can everybody see that map? I don't know. I need somebody answer.
Yes.
Okay, so this is a 60 scale map. This is just printed from our internal GIS system in City Hall, right? So you can see this is just Main Street, Patch Street, Clifton Place. You can kind of see the bump outs of the building. You may be able to designate where a building entrance would be. And so this is the regulations say to determine the distance requirements, you have to use a map at this scale. Attorney Mizuko, so that's 1 in 60. Attorney Mizuko suggested that we amend that to allow a scale of 1 in 200. And you can see you lose a lot of detail. So, rectangles become, with some detail become more rect. I don't really know. I can't really tell where an entrance to a building was, and does it really meet the distance requirement? So again, I'm going to submit this as exhibits 3A and B. I'm sorry, I should have noted the previous amendment would have been exhibit 2. So this would be 3A and 3B to show you what a 60 versus a 200 scale map might look like. Now, I understand that it may mean different sheets and things like that, but I think we ought to stick to what we have. And it's worked for package stores, so what's the necessity to change it? So I'll submit that for the record. So that is the way the regulation is written in 4. What map scale size, it has to be certified and to surveyor standards. Again, class A2. This is what we get when we have package stores. So we should get it for this. Again, we're talking about uses that sell a product that is new to everybody. Okay, so continuing, number 5, to ensure the safety and cleanliness of the establishment premises and the vicinity are maintained and that operation of the use doesn't result in a detectable impacts beyond the physical limits of the building or structure containing the establishment, we're going to ask for some additional things in terms of the application. Number 1, an odor abatement program. So tell us how you're going to abate the odors, how are you going to control the odors that are coming out? And I think we can all agree that not just in terms of growing this, but there's an odor to it. There's no question, obviously, when you're smoking it, there's an odor to it, but when you're growing it and working with it, there's an odor to it. So we want to know how you're going to, what kind of odor control measures you're going to provide. B, we want a property management program to ensure that the outdoor space and the parking areas and the sidewalks are kept clear and clean and clean daily. So that things aren't just litter isn't collecting and things like that. And number 3, a written security plan for the building on how the building will be secured that should be reviewed and approved by the chief of police or his designee, and a security plan that provides information on the vaults because the cannabis has to be kept in the vaults, and information relative to the alarm system, and a notification that you're going to need to comply with the code of ordinances on the alarms. And that means, for instance, if your alarm goes off 6 times and it's a false alarm, you're going to end up like everybody else who's in that position, that's to register their alarm. They're there's some penalties associated with that. So those are some additional measures that we thought were important relative to this use, these uses, should we allow them. Number 6, each application for the grant of special exception site plan approval, again, this is what goes to the Planning Commission, shall include a traffic impact analysis prepared in accordance with 10D11. And we've noted the trip generation rate that you use for the dispensaries, the retailers, and the hybrids are code 882 of the ITE 10th manual as may be amended. And the micro cultivators will use the industrial section in 10D11. So the Institute of Traffic Engineers now has a land use code relative to cannabis establishments. We should be using that. And so instead of adding it to section 10, we just put it here, be very clear what code they need to use. Prior to issuance, prior to issuance of a zoning permit, we want to see, we being the city, we want to see your final license that you get from the state. Well, I think that's reasonable and appropriate. The Planning Commission approving a special exception may impose such reasonable conditions that will ensure compliance with the regulations. Again, that's a standard requirement in our regulations for other special exception uses. All other conditions of the regulations shall be met. Again, standard condition. And then T and U have to do with prohibition on the issuance of variances. So no variance shall be granted to allow a cannabis establishment in any other zoning district. Why? Because you, the zoning commission, it's your role as a legislative agency to determine what uses are appropriate in what zoning district. We don't think it's appropriate for an applicant to now try to go to the ZBA and get a use variance to allow one of these 4 uses, which we're highly regulating because of the sensitive nature and because we want to protect the health, safety, and welfare, to the possibility that they might get a use variance and put it in a residential zone, something like that. So we added that provision. And then in U, no variance shall be granted from any of the general or specific use regulations pertaining to cannabis establishments noted in this section, or as may be applicable to said use as contained in any other section of the regs. Again, it prevents applicants from trying to bypass the regulation, these specific use regulations, and just trying to get a variance for it. And why? Because we're trying to protect the health, safety, and welfare. And we think this is, a strict regulation is essential in order to do that. So those are all the specific use regulations related to these 4 cannabis establishment uses. And then in section 5, as you can see, I'm on page 9. I'm almost done. I apologize. I'm on page 9. Again, we've added them to 5A2. B, which is a special exception use in the CG20 zone, the dispensary, the hybrid, and the retailer, again, with the reference back to all those regulations. We deleted the section, the previous section on medical marijuana dispensary, because now we're covering that as part of this, so we don't need that anymore. And then again, in 5B, which is the CA80 zone, we added it to the list of those 3 uses to the list of special exception uses in that zone, subject to, again, those 3C4 provisions, and got rid of the marijuana dispensary regulation that didn't apply. And then in section 6, which is the IL40 zone and the IG80 zone, we added the cannabis micro cultivator. Again, we added them in order of the use, in alphabetical order, like we always do. And we reference back the new provisions in 3C4. So we made them special exception uses in both of those zones, subject to 3C4. The proposed regulations in section 8 are the supplemental regs. Those are the off-street parking and loading regulations. And that we've added a use category now because there actually is a use category in the Institute of Traffic Engineers Parking Generation Demand Manual for cannabis dispensary facility, hybrid retailer, and cannabis retailer. And those spaces are calculated at 1 per 140 of usable gross area. And that's about a little over 7 per 1,000. Again, it's not a number I pulled out of the air. We have research. That's the Institute of Traffic Engineers, as I said. That's a source that we use all the time, and it's pretty standard in the industry. There was some other questions from some other people. I know Mr. Barnes is on here about how to calculate that, and we would calculate that, like if there's office space, for instance. As part of the overall structure, we would, like we do everything else, we might take the office space out, calculate it 1 per 300, but your actual dispensary facility or retail sales area would be calculated at this requirement. So we would do it the same as we always do. And then finally, almost finally, 10J obviously is the section on the temporary moratorium. Should you approve these, we would delete that whole section because that would no longer apply. And then finally, in section 11, which is the Zoning Board of Appeals, we added in, as I indicated previously, those prohibitions on the variances to in the section on the ZBA, just to kind of belt and suspenders. We put it in the reg and we put it in the section on the ZBA, so you can't miss it. And I thank everybody for their patience and letting me go through all this. I think that is, for the most part, what I have. I would be happy to entertain. I know it's a lot. I'd be happy to obviously answer any questions that the commission has at this time.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Calitro. Commission members, any questions of Ms. Calitro at this time? Anybody have any questions? Commissioner Malillo, please go ahead.
Ms. Calitro, I have one question now. I may have some more later on towards the closer to the close of the evening, but mainly for right now, in relationship to the alarm systems, is there any requirement for video surveillance? I'm thinking back, with some of the, I'm thinking back to the homeless shelter petition and them talking about video surveillance for that. And if it was like a major thing, I'm just wondering, is there any thoughts in regarding a video surveillance requirement as part of an alarm system for a facility of this type of use?
I'm still in. Okay. Yeah, no, that's a good question. So it talks about a security plan to ensure the contents of the building are secured. That has to be reviewed, and it has to include, again, information on the vaults and the alarms. I suppose, I wouldn't obviously object if you wanted to. I'm just not really sure. Like whether you could get that information just if you ask for, you know what I mean? It's like a private camera on someone's property. Like, I'm not sure you would have a right. Maybe Attorney Casagrande or Attorney Robert Edwards could answer this, but I'm not sure what your rights are in terms of being able to. I'm not saying it's not a good idea, but whether you could just access that information because you just felt like you wanted to see it. I don't know if you have the ability to do that if somebody's just video recording. They might want to do it themselves, which is a great idea. But if we required it, I'm not sure we could ask them at our whim to say, hey, show me your video because I just want to see anything. I mean,
yeah, I'm not even really sure if it would be just because, but in case there was a criminal complaint or anything along those lines, yeah, I think it would be helpful if the mechanism was there for the authorities to be able to review.
Yeah, I have no problem adding that in. I just want to and we could say a written secure building contents of the building, secure building shall include information, shall include information on vaults for the safekeeping of cannabis product and details on videography, video recording of and video recordings of the exterior of the facility. I'm not sure you could ask for like what goes on inside necessarily, but I just want to caution everybody, because I'm not obviously I'm not a lawyer, but whether, you know, you could just say, oh yeah, let's ask them to see their videos. I mean,
Well, why don't we ask Attorney Casagrande? Because if
Sure.
I was to give you what I know, it would only be what I saw on Law and Order. And
I was gonna
sometimes
say,
it doesn't,
he
and sometimes
turned-
it just doesn't work out.
Yeah, and he turned his camera on, which if we were in the city council, it means he would be standing. He would be literally stood up and would have been standing right next to Sharon right now at the microphone. So,
Yeah.
Attorney Casagrande, any comments?
Episode, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry?
I saw the same episode of Law and Order.
Okay.
I don't want to give you a drive-by opinion. The only concern I guess I would have is, you know, for the medical dispensaries, query, is there a HIPAA requirement, privacy requirement that comes into play? I don't know the answer to that. I'd have to do the research on it.
yeah, and even if we couldn't apply it to medical, I don't see why there'd be any reason why we couldn't make it mandatory, at least for recreational uses. Could you look into that and then let us know?
Sure.
Thank you, Attorney Casagrande.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that we would, Mr. Commissioner Malillo, we would have to look into that to be sure, just to check into the distinctions and the requirements on that. And we could definitely get back to you on that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Attorney Edwards.
You're welcome.
Any commission members, anything else at this time? I see Mr. Jotty unmute, and you have the floor. Commissioner Jotty.
Sharon, you did a great job. You worked real hard at that. You know, your proposal, you have some great guidelines, and if they don't work, we could tweak them later. We're not looking for perfection right now. Good job.
Thank you, Mr. Joe.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Jotty, Ms. Calitro. I see Commissioner Hawley's hand, please.
Thank you. Yeah, so Sharon, I just had a quick question regarding the cannabis micro cultivator. I see that it's only allowed in an indoor, fully enclosed building. Now, where do like trailers go into this? Because I've seen in the past, like people are getting creative with their farming, especially in like urban environments, like repurposing some kind of trailers to grow their food or other kind of growable plants. How would that fit into this current zoning scheme?
That's a good question. I guess if you had all the facilities that you needed to do that in an industrial zone, like any other use, I suppose you could do it.
So that'd be
I don't see why you could, you know, if you're in an IL zone or IG-80 zone, you met all the requirements, you had access to water and sewer, because you're going to need all of that to grow. It takes a lot of water. The plants, the plants are actually kept in the dark because they like the darkness to grow. But yeah, it's like hydroponic farming, basically. Yeah, so I don't necessarily see that is an issue. But again, you'd have to meet all the other requirements, and you'd have to, you know, have access to everything that you need: electricity, water, sewer, and all that stuff, like any other land use.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Hawley, that was a wild question. That was excellent.
No, that was a great question, because
Yeah.
if I could just say, somebody asked a couple of years ago about farming, but like they couldn't actually do that in the zone they were proposing to do it. So I mean,
Right.
and it is kind of the new way to grow things.
Crazy. Thank you. Anything else at this time of Ms. Calitro, commission members? Anything else of Ms. Calitro? Anything else, commission members? I don't hear or see. So we're going to now go to anyone wishing to speak in favor of this petition.
Excuse me, just one
Yeah.
sec before, do you want to just mention about Attorney Mizuko's letters that were on the agenda?
Yes,
Just
I'm sorry.
reminding you.
I saw his hand raised. Attorney Mizuko, why don't we let you go right now? And do you want to address your letter? I don't know if you want to read it in. I don't know if you have any follow-up from the date that you sent this in, but you have the floor, so help yourself. Commission members, public, this is Attorney Mizuko. Go ahead. You're on mute. Commissioner, Attorney Mizuko, unmute your mic.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Good evening,
There you
Mr.
go.
Chairman, members of the commission. I'll try to keep my comments less than 3 hours tonight. Sorry for the late hour.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
But I do, I'll try to be as brief as possible. I'm here on behalf of D&B Wellness, Inc., which does business as The Botanist. As you know, it conducts the medical marijuana business at 105 Mill Plain Road in Danbury. And first off, I want to compliment the planning department for just a very thorough and comprehensive job with the regulations, as well as the city's legal team, which clearly had some input as well. We enthusiastically support the regulations, and if the commission sees fit to approve them, we hope to apply to the planning commission for a special exception for the hybrid retailer permit. Just circling back to some of the comments made at the early part of the meeting this evening, the state has spoken. Retail sales of marijuana for recreational adult use are legal in Connecticut. It's here. It's going to happen. And it can also be delivered into any municipality. So cannabis will be present in Danbury, and but only those retail facilities located within the city will be obligated to pay the 3% sales tax, all of which goes to the city. Plus, the public would have assurance of pure, unadulterated product in contrast to what might be sold on the street. So the effect of your approval to the proposed regulations is to allow recreational cannabis to be sold in addition to medical cannabis from our facility, and to enable the city to collect the tax. I had a few issues of concern. Sharon answered the first one. The language that she proposes about notifying her department of any changes in license make perfectly good sense. That's a very thoughtful way to deal with the issue. Our concerns really come down to some functional issues, if you will, having to do with the survey requirements and some of the definitions in the distance requirements. So if I can just share my screen, I can, if that would be all right with the chair, I can.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, so you alluded to a letter that I submitted. There's really no reason to dwell on it. It's in the record. Ms. Calitro addressed really our most important concern, which was the transfer of
very good
ownership. So let me just jump into the next issue, which is the distance requirements. And as she pointed out, this all goes back to section 148 of the so-called RERACA, the new cannabis statute. And it says that any municipality may, by amendment to such municipality zoning regulations, establish restrictions on the proximity of cannabis establishments to any of the establishments listed in subsection A of subdivision 1 of section 30-46. And if we go to that statute.
I'm sorry, Mr. Haddad?
Yes, sir.
Could we see if Attorney Mizuko could make it any larger?
Attorney Mizuko, are you handy with that thing?
Oh boy, Mr. Malone, you got me here. Let me see.
I can possibly pull out my glasses and see it. I'm on a different screen, but I'm thinking about people who are limited to maybe one screen, who may not have the luxury of putting glasses on to see it. So
yeah, no, that's a. Unfortunately, I put it into a PDF, and I'm a PowerPoint. And I'm not sure I can enlarge it the way I could with a PDF. So forgive me. I'll read the relevant part.
Wait, what's that on the? What's that on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen? It shows 74%. Toggle that a little bit, see what happens.
Ah, you're right. That does it. Does that help?
Commissioner Malillo, how you on that?
I can see it, and I could barely see the other one, but like I said, but I have decent vision. I know there are some people who do need glasses that I was looking to see help everybody. So
there you go.
I
think
appreciate it,
this
Ted. Thank you
works.
very much.
Yeah. Thank you for the technical support. I really appreciate it.
Beautiful. Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so this statute dates back quite a while when liquor permits were in their early days in Connecticut. And it says that the Department of Consumer Protection may essentially refuse to grant or renew a permit if it believes that the proximity of the permitted premises will have a detrimental effect on any church, public or parochial school, convent, charitable institution, whether supported by private or public funds, hospital or veterans home, or any camp, barracks, or flying field of the armed forces. So I think what they were contemplating when they wrote the statute is that if somebody applied for a permit, they'd have one of those white signs out front that says, we're applying for a permit. And then if you had a school, church, charitable institution, you could come forward and state your objections. But when the RERACA law was passed, it said that the commission was entitled to impose distance requirements from these uses and perhaps those others, as Ms. Calitro pointed out. So it kind of turns it around so that instead of these uses being able to come forward and saying, hey, wait a minute, this might not be good for me. Now the shoe is on the other foot and we have to come forward and identify all of these uses. So that is the concern. So anticipating that we might be developing an area plan that's required by the regulations, I reached out to Matt Reynolds, a very prominent surveyor, and he furnished this letter, which says a couple of things. One, the 1 inch equals 60 foot scale is good for the other uses that Ms. Calitro identified because they're generally all 500 foot distance requirements. So you can fit everything within 500 feet on a 60 scale map without great difficulty. And then it's easy for commissioners and members of the planning staff to evaluate it. But when you have a 1,000 foot distance requirement for some uses, that's not twice as much land area, that's 4 times as much land area. And at that point, you're talking about a few sheets that have to be taped together. And I can't imagine that the city really wants to be dealing with these unwieldy maps all taped together that show a 1,000 foot swath around every property. So just as a matter of convenience for everyone, I would respectfully suggest that a 200 scale would really help all concerned. But that's really a minor point compared to the requirement of having an A2 survey between the legal parcel boundary lines for all these various uses. Now, an A2 survey is required in some of the other city regulations for uses where there's a shorter distance requirement, like 500 feet. But when you get to 1,000 feet, the surveying work to create maps to standard A2, which is the highest level of surveying accuracy, means potentially resurveying vast areas around the subject property. It's a huge amount of work, as the surveyor indicates, and using maps like the city's GIS map that Ms. Calitro showed us earlier should be really perfectly satisfactory for determining what is whether a requisite distance has been met. So that's sort of the surveying difficulty. Now, the next part of it is what you have to be distant from. And some of the uses are easy to define and some not so much. So if you look at the requirements for the cannabis hybrid retailers, I lost it, there we go. You know, a licensed adult or child daycare center, a dependency treatment center, a place of worship, those are easy, identifiable places. We know what they mean. We know where they are. We can find them. A surveyor can find them, which is what the area plan would call for. The problem is that some of these, like a public recreation area, a charitable institution, including any offices thereof, even a bus stop, those are very hard to define. Let's say that someone who works at the United Way lives in the neighborhood of one of these places and works from home. Does that mean that the use is prohibited because any office of the United Way is in the neighborhood? That just doesn't work. And how would we even know that this person is there? Are we supposed to go door to door and say, hey, anybody here work for a charity? It's just unworkable. It's well-intended. Nobody wants to impinge on charities or any of these other uses that the city is thoughtfully trying to protect. But it's very hard to define them. It's hard to find them. And their locations may be inaccurate and subject to change, like the school bus stop. Now, I did learn that you can get school bus stops on the Board of Education website, but they change frequently, even during the school year and certainly year to year. And when it comes to hotels, a hotel can become a bus stop if there's a displaced family there. So it's not that we're trying to expose school children to the influence of a cannabis facility, but I don't know how a surveyor can tell you with A2 accuracy where a bus stop is. You know, it doesn't pull up on the north side of the house, the south side of the house. What if it pulls up next door? It's a well-intended, but unfortunately unworkable definition. So I respectfully propose these changes to the distance requirement for cannabis hybrid retailers. As you can see, it identifies the specific charitable institutions to be protected. It eliminates the requirement for a bus stop because it's just, again, just about impossible to locate. And it eliminates things like the public recreation area because that just has no recognized definition. So that really, so that really concludes our concerns. They're very minor in the scheme of things. These are very small tweaks, but important tweaks because everybody wants this statute, this regulation to work. You know, the city will benefit and the public will benefit from the introduction of these facilities that have been legitimized by the legislature. So I hope that the commission and the planning department will work with us to refine the language a little bit on distance requirements so that a surveyor can actually prepare the plan that's required. And then just back to Commissioner Melillo's comment about video cameras. My client tells me that video cameras are a requirement of the state regulatory scheme, and that they fully intend to have video cameras here. So I hope that addresses his concern. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to address them, but that concludes what I was hoping to leave with you tonight.
Thank you, Attorney Mizuko. Commission members, any questions of Attorney Mizuko at this time? I think Commissioner Malillo was asking not only about the video cameras, but Commissioner Malillo, were you asking upon request if there was trouble or a problem that the city can view the video, or were you just requiring video to be on site?
I wasn't thinking at all upon the review. I figured if the need arose, that request would be made, but I would want it to be available. I wasn't thinking that they needed to come in. I'm not anticipating a scenario where the Gestapo is going to come knock on the door and say, "Let me see your paper, let me see your video," But and just in terms of should something arise, they could have something to review.
Okay, thank you. So, Attorney Mizuko, you just said that it's required anyway as part of the state's package.
Yes, sir.
Great. Thank you very much, Attorney Mizuko, Commissioner Malillo. I see that there's a hand raised, but let me also just say one more thing. And let me just ask, Commissioner members, any more questions of Attorney Mizuko at this time before I go on to any other people? We're all set. Thank you, Attorney Mizuko, for now. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this petition? I see Al Jamaica,
like Jamaica with a D.
Okay, so you have the floor, so go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the commissioners for really taking time and writing these new regulations, especially Sharon, who I'm sure has spent a lot of time with this. My name's Al Jamaica. I reside at 53 Old Rod Road in Colchester, Connecticut. I am currently the director of retail operations of Acreage Holdings of Connecticut, which we have 3 licenses, medical licenses in Connecticut. I am also a licensed pharmacist. I started with the program from its inception. I'm actually the first licensed pharmacist in the state of Connecticut. I hold license number 1 as a dispensary pharmacist. So, and now I oversee pharmacy operations for all 3 of our locations, as well as certain training and retail initiatives. I just wanted to clear up a few things. As far as the video, yes. So as part of our application to the state, and this will also be required in a hybrid license or a retail establishment, that the state, we need to prove to the state that we do have these security measures in place, including video. And it's not just one video. We have over 20 different cameras in different areas of both inside and outside. As far as your question, as far as would they be available to law enforcement? Yes, with the proper documentation. Obviously, we want to keep the privacy of our patients a priority as well. Although we're not bound by HIPAA per se, we in those regulations, we are still obligated to protect the privacy of our patients. So hopefully that sort of clears the video question up. As far as I heard some comments about just sort of the smell and things that that can emanate from these facilities. Just want to make something clear that consumption is not allowed on the premises of any facility. These are in the state regulations as well as our own corporate policies. So people come in to the facility, get their medication in an opaque bag. It's not even, we can't even put any sort of our own branding on the bag. It's an opaque plain bag. So so there should be not a lot of smell emanating from these facilities. Yes, in a cultivation facility, yes, you do smell it more, but in an actual retail establishment, hybrid establishment, you don't. As far as a hybrid model, which we are intending to apply for a hybrid license, which we would allow which we'd be selling both medical and adult use. Just keep in mind, in a hybrid model, pharmacists will still be on site. And that will be throughout our whole operating hours. So there will, all sales will still be supervised and overseen by a licensed pharmacist. So hopefully those are a couple questions that I could clear up a little bit. Again, thank you for your time, and we do support this, these regulations.
Thank you. Mr. Geraldo, I see your hand, but let me finish up with Mr. DeMaca. So let me ask you, sir, presently you're the facility D&B Wellness?
Yeah,
Okay.
what's one of our licenses.
When the consumer goes in, is it all by appointment only? Or
no, they can order things online. When they initially come into the facility, there is an appointment that the pharmacist will sit down with that patient and go over their health conditions, drug medications. So we do screen for drug interactions. We go over the different products. We go over the side effects, the expected effects, the risks and benefits of that, and we go over their health conditions and pick products with that patient. They get the correct medication.
So if you do hybrid, the recreational user will just be walking in off the street?
Yeah, so it obviously adult use retailers, it's open to the public, 21 and over. And obviously we do have security measures as well. I mean, children are not going to be allowed to go into these facilities. We have security measures in place. We have security personnel that they're not going to be able to get into the facility. But yes, so there will be, the general public can come in and purchase certain items. Now there will be medical items and there will be adult use items. The adult use items will have potency limits. Those are in the adult use regulations as we see them now. So they're going to have THC limits. So they're not going to have 100 milligram capsule or what have you that you see on the medical side. It's going to be limited to a 5 or 10 milligram dose.
On the recreational, you're saying?
On the recreational, yes.
So if I arrive at your facility at 10 after 12 in the afternoon, and someone else walks in and I see somebody walk in the door, I don't know if they're there for medical or recreational.
Well, we're going to have a plan in place. First of all, we're going to prioritize our medical patients. So there'll be separate lines, there'll be separate registers. Depending on the layout of each facility, we'll definitely have different spaces for the medical community and then the adult use community. But medical patients will have priority. So they have priority for products. If there's a supply shortage, medical patients get those products first, and they will be prioritized in line and such. So that those are all in our plans submitted to the state. We have to submit a medical preservation plan, and that's part of it. So
got it. So to reverse that, if I'm in the store shopping and someone comes in and they see me, they don't know if I'm there with a medical card or if I'm there recreationally.
That is true. It is anonymous. So on the adult use side, there are privacy provisions in those regulations as well, where we cannot collect any patient information or public information unless they opt in. If they opt in for our emails and things like that, then that's okay. But they have to opt in for us to collect that information. On the medical side, they're put on a list and they have to pick a dispensary, and we have their doctor information and things of that nature. But on the adult use side, you can be as private as you want to.
Thank you. And web sales and deliveries and all that stuff is all part of it?
Yeah, so the deliveries is one of the licenses that are available to apply for. So we would be using a third-party delivery service, and they have their own stipulations and regulations that they have to prove to the state that they're safe, including GPS tracking and video surveillance and things of that nature.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I appreciate all the answers. Commissioner Malillo, a question of Mr. DeMaker.
Yeah, I have a question for Mr. DeMaker. Something he said prompted me to think about this. So you mentioned that for the adult use, I think that was the terminology that you used, what we've commonly referring to as the recreational use.
I like to say adult use. I'm a pharmacist. I like to.
Yeah. So I just wanted to clarify first that what I just want to make sure we're talking apples and apples.
Yeah, and I use adult use because when you use recreationally, recreation, things of that nature, it's the intent is to get that euphoric feeling. A lot of people who use cannabis actually use it for a medical condition. Their doctor may not have the proper qualification for that condition, and they're not. They can't get a medical card, but people use it for sleep, for anxiety, for depression. I like to say adult use just because most people who use cannabis are not using it to get that high feeling. It's to treat something. So.
Okay. Thank you for that. That's not the question I had, though.
Oh, I know. I'm sorry. But adult use and recreational
yeah.
for this purpose, yes.
Yeah. No, I'm glad we got that clarification. But what prompted my question was that you had mentioned about the dosage usage or the strength of the strength of it is limited. So is it safe to say that I'm a school teacher? For proximity. So I teach. I teach high school. It's no big surprise that I know of kids in my school who have used it. Okay. And they currently get it from, let's just say a local dealer. And or local, no, let me say a local supplier. It sounds better. Okay. From a local supplier. And so the what they're getting from their local supplier, would that be a higher strength than what they would get from like a regulated establishment?
I don't know because it's probably not tested. So everything that comes through the dispensary, whether it's on the medical side or the adult use side, is going to be tested in an independent laboratory. So the exact potency. For someone who's growing it in his basement or the backyard or whatever, more than likely they're not getting it tested in a laboratory, right? They're growing it illegally. They're selling it illegally. So I doubt that the potency is going to be tested. And also contaminants are not going to be tested. Everything that comes through our facilities is not only potency tested, but it's tested for different contaminants like molds, mildews, bacteria, heavy metals, things of that nature. And Connecticut has done a great job with the strict guidelines for their testing. So I don't have an answer for you because I don't know. I'm sure that there are certain growers or dealers on the black market that do a good job of growing their product, and some not so good. They can use fertilizers, pesticides, things that are not healthy for you. So that's why it is safer to go to a licensed regulated dispensary.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking in terms of just for an example, I know people who, when they have a headache, take 4 ibuprofen because 2 ibuprofen is not enough. Okay. And or they say, I can't take, no, but don't give me Tylenol. Tylenol doesn't work. I need Motrin. Not to plug any plugs on anything, but or to disparage any brand. But I'm just thinking in terms of just to be realistic, and this isn't like by approving this petition and opening up these centers and these facilities, we're not going to eliminate the other market that's there, because it is safe to at least assume that there are going to be people out there who say, what I buy at that place is not going to be enough for me. I'm going to need to go elsewhere.
So there's always going to be a black market, but allowing these establishments to be part of your community is going to decrease the black market sales, because now it's going to be, I'm not talking about teenagers, but I'm talking about normal adults that are not going behind McDonald's and getting it. Now they're going to be able to go into a facility and actually get a tested product, a safe product. Teenagers, unfortunately, they're going to do what they're going to do. They also go to liquor stores with fake IDs. So
That's all, Mr. Hennig.
You good? Thank you. How about one more crazy question? What's the pricing structure like between going to a legal facility and buying it from the street?
I don't know. I've never bought anything on the street, so I don't know.
Okay, that's all right. I didn't know if it was a thing.
I don't know. Maybe Hector, you can help me a little bit.
I saw his hand up. I was gonna ask him. I figured he would volunteer the answer before I don't know. To ask him.
But I would still think that it may be a little bit less expensive on the black market, and that's just because of all the different steps it has to go through to get to the facility. It has to be grown, it has to be manufactured, packaged. There's specific packaging requirements that the state puts on the growers. The transport and the testing can get a little pricey as well, because they don't only test for the contaminants, they test for all the cannabinoids that are in a particular marijuana plant. They test for terpenes as well. I mean, Connecticut is pretty rigorous on their testing, so we can actually analyze these products and actually can predict how different products would affect our patients. And that's going to be the same on the adult use side as well.
Thank you very much. Commission members, anything else of Mr. DeMaca? Thank you very much, sir. So now we go to Mr. Gerardo. Unmute, take the floor over.
How you guys doing? And thank you again for doing this work and being out here until 10 o'clock at
This
night.
is early for us sometimes.
To make sure that this is done the right way. And I just want to commend everybody for doing the work that they are doing, but we need to do the research. And now I'm on the fence of being not opposed to holding a year so we can do more research, because the only thing I didn't hear from this is, they have an equity, social equity applicants, right? There's nothing from what I heard about social equity applicants. What I heard was more for the MSOs like Acreage, the ones that are making all the money already. Are the ones that already are existing in Danbury, because they are the owners of the botanists. So people like me do not have a chance against somebody like Acreage. So how can Danbury help people that look like me, who has a zone? Danbury has a social equity zone designated to make sure that people like me have a chance in this industry. And I don't hear anything about that in the conversation we are having here. All I hear is about how more people that have already have all the money and already have the foot in the door, because like the gentleman from Acreage said, he's the first one in Connecticut, so he already made millions of dollars. So what about the people? You can shake your head. Acreage, not you, but Acreage, the company, have made millions of dollars. So how can people like me can grab some of that money as well? So I hear about making sure that the kids, again, I want to make sure that you guys know I haven't seen a restriction about liquor store. Liquor in Danbury, I haven't seen the restrictions with liquor, because again, there's a brewery right next to Montessori School in Danbury in Danbury, Connecticut. So we talking about, keeping it away and health and safety. What I hear is the reefer madness from the 1930s, scaring people about a plant. This is a plant. This is not alcohol that is gonna cause a car accident. There has never been recorded a death just solely by consuming cannabis. No person in this earth have died from consuming cannabis solely. You have to consume it with something else that's gonna increase whatever it is that you are increasing in your body. But nobody in this country, in the world, has died from cannabis. Nobody, not even a dog. Dog eat, I don't know if you see the stories, a dog go into people's stashes and eat the whole stash and they don't die. Weed does not kill people. Alcohol does. Alcohol actually kills people. Well, I don't see the restrictions. Cigarettes actually kill people. And I don't see the restrictions in Danbury for cigarettes and liquor like I see for cannabis. A tomato can kill a person. If you're not growing it the right way, that can kill you. And I don't see the restrictions for that. So for me, it's like, where's the social equity part of this proposal that I don't see? I only see the proposal for the big MSOs like Acreage Holdings. So I just want to make sure that we are thinking about the zone that was created in Danbury for equity applicants that are not represented right now.
So I'm going to sound, I'm sure, like an idiot here, but what, and I probably read it somewhere, but what's MSO stand for?
Multi-state operators. So Acreage have multiple businesses all over the country, not just in Connecticut. So multi-state operators are the big companies that are coming into communities and taking over. And that cannot happen. Danbury has the opportunity to do it right. We have an opportunity to do it right. Nowhere in the United States have any state that has legalized have done it right. Nowhere. And Connecticut is going the same way. 56 licenses. And again, I commend Sharon, because that's why we should put another year, because it's only 56 licenses. People in Danbury right now might not get a license right now. So doing more studies and engaging people like me, actually engaging me and not just listening to me today and then forget about what I said, but actually reaching out to people that look like me and having this conversation, being in the room with people like me, is gonna make sure that Danbury is being equitable for the people that been harmed the most by the war on drugs that was created to put Black and brown people in jail for a plant. Again, it's just a plant. Just to make sure that we are talking about a plant, not alcohol, not prescription pills like Moratorium or Tylenol that kill more people than cannabis, but we're talking about a plant. And this is how we're talking about a plant that's supposed to be a healing plant for the body. Cacao has cannabinoids, the same cannabinoids that the marijuana plant has, cacao has, and we eat chocolate all the time.
Thank you. Commission members, any questions of Mr. Gerardo at this time? Commission members of Mr. Gerardo. Commissioner Melillo.
I'm sorry, I don't keep on meaning. I just want to get something clear. I think it's obviously clear Mr. Gerardo he's in supportive of the regulations. He's in supportive of the use. However, I hear a little bit of concern in him that he has a couple concerns that the regulations may not go far enough in addressing some of the social equity aspects of it. So is it safe to say that that you're on the fence more to, like, you're not in opposition to this, however, you would like to potentially see some modifications made, which is why you were just saying maybe you would lean more towards the extended time? Is that it? I don't want to classify you as in opposition, but because you're more in favor. However, I think there's a little but in there, and I just wanted to clarify that.
I just think that you guys have it's working. Sharon has been working in a great skeleton, but it needs more. It needs more to be representative of the people that are still being jailed for this plan. So people in Connecticut are still being arrested for this plan. We are talking about it like it's crack or heroin, which is not. You know what I'm saying? It's a plant. So for me, I'm like, before, when I first started this conversation with you guys and I heard you guys, I was like really upset about the conversation. But now hearing the research and the work that Sharon has done to make sure that this is going the right way, we just need to make sure that we are being inclusive and making sure that the MSOs are not the ones making all the money here in Danbury.
Thank you. You good, Commissioner Melillo? Thank you. So we generally don't do what I'm going to do now, but Mr. Gerardo did open a door. So I'm going to go back and ask Mr. D'Amica a question. So without digging into your pockets, Clearly, it's none of my business what your gross receipts are. What can Danbury get for their 3%? I mean, what kind of numbers are we talking about here for on the revenue side of this? Has anybody done any projections? You must, clearly, if you're going to look to spend all the money and obtain a license, you know what you're going to gross.
So
Pretty
I would
wild question, huh?
Yeah. I don't want to give away everything, but
You don't have
I would
to.
say, I would say that our sales will increase. Let's just say we do $1 million in sales a month, and that's pretty achievable, then 30,000 would go to Danbury a month.
Right.
And as far as Hector's questions for social equity, I don't know if you heard that the state did award, I believe, 12 or 14 social equity cultivators earlier today, and there will be social equity dispensaries that will be awarded later on in a few months. So the application process has to go through the state. I don't think Danbury has, Danbury can definitely welcome a social equity applicant to their town, but it has to go, you would need to get a state, the state would have to reward you that social equity license.
That's for any license. The state got to award you any license that you apply for. The social equity, non-social equity, that's the state. But Danbury can put, like right now, they're working on the zoning, and they can make sure that they add social equity. That is not just for MSOs. That is also including the social equity applicants in Connecticut, in Danbury, because any license that you acquire has to go through the state, not just the social equity application.
Correct.
You're mute.
Sorry, I said we'll take that. Thank you. We'll take that up with Ms. Calitro when we get circle back to her. Is there anything else of Mr. Gerardo at this time, commission members? I don't see or hear. So I will now ask, is there anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this petition? Is there anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this petition? Is there anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this petition? Is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition to this petition?
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry.
Who's that, Councilman Perkins?
Yeah, I got a lot of
Sure.
things going on here.
Where are you at? Are you in favor or are you opposed?
No, I'm in favor.
Well, then you almost missed your shot. We'll let you sneak in here because you're doing too much at the same time. Stop it. Pay attention to us. Go ahead.
So I'd like to thank Sharon on this. You know, she's been really, really super busy helping us all run this great city. And just listening to her and just reading through that documentation, I can tell that she did a great job at it. And there was a whole bunch of thought that went into it. I think it puts a little bit of a squeeze on the micro cultivators, because part of, and I'm not an advocate for micro cultivator. I'm just explaining part of their business model. Part of what they do is to, let's just say, complete the process in-house in terms of indoor grow, extraction, and branded retail. That's what they do. So to take away that sales aspect from them, I think it's going to hurt that industry. Because at that point, they would rely on getting their flower and their various types of extracts into other distilleries or dispensaries. And sometimes it doesn't really work like that so much. Usually people want to keep in-house what they sell as a branded product. So it's going to be a little bit more difficult for them to fulfill their business objective if they can't have a small aspect of retail sales. And that's just my opinion. As far as the odor, of a grow house, I guess there is some that emanates, but as far as the districts that they will be in, the areas that they will be in the city, I'm not sure if that's going to be that big of a problem. And the last thing to address Mr. Gerardo, I mean, I don't know if I can do this or not, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. that whole thing that he mentions is part of the Social Equity Council. If he wants, he can just go ahead and apply through the social equity lottery and just hope that he gets it. But the fact remains, and if he's saying that MSOs have a great advantage, well, they do, because they're the ones that can put up all the money, and they're the ones that can finance all these huge operations. I mean, imagine how much it would cost to build out a $10,000 or 10,000 square foot greenhouse. Imagine the millions of dollars that you would need. Most of the social equity candidates can't do that. So that's why they're already at a unfair disadvantage. And that's why it's fortunate that some social equity candidates can be selected to be included in that process. So that's all I have. I'm glad that we're getting to a point where we can begin to put forth some legislation, some ordinances that will get this whole thing moving. And thanks again, Sharon, and thank you all, commissioners. And I'll try to be focused. I'll try to pay more attention to this stuff. Thank you, Chairman and commissioners.
Thank you, Councilman Perkins. Commission members, any questions of Councilman Perkins at this time? Any questions? No. Councilman Rotello, your hand's flying.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Again, Paul Rotello for the record, 13 Linden Place, Danbury. I'm in favor of the petition. It was a tour de force. I was on the original Cannabis Commission committee back in July, met in July and August, and have a fairly good idea, not a complete idea, but a fairly good idea of the amount of work that Sharon put into this, along with council. And I could not have done what she did, but if I could have done what she did, I would have done what she did. I think it's a home run. I think it's an amazing start, and I think there's nothing but upside with this proposal. And by that, I mean, there's room for expansion. If we want to do Main Street, we can. If we want more dispensaries, we can. If we want to address Councilman Perkins' issue about in-house retail with micro growers, we can. Just to assuage him a little bit, they're not completely out of the loop when it comes to retail. They just can't have on-premise retail. They can have web-based retail, and I think web-based retail is going to be a large proportion of all of the establishments in Danbury. I spent a tremendous amount of time last year when right after Connecticut passed the original legislation, this 300-page Franken statute. Spent a lot of time at border dispensaries in Massachusetts, where they have a very different take that Danbury has. I mean, you go to Great Barrington, and by the time you've gotten to downtown Barrington, you've already passed 3 or 4 dispensaries, and there are still more, including on Main Street, several on Main Street. These are not a mile apart or 1,000 feet apart. They seem to be a couple of 100 feet apart. I'm not sure how they're all going to survive, but they have a sort of monolithic design in the sense that they're essentially sterile to the point of severe. They're not head shops. We were able to find one head shop in what you might consider to be a head shop in Massachusetts. But for the most part, these things look like clean rooms for a chip manufacturing company. And if there's a deleterious effect on the surrounding neighborhood, we were not able to find one. They had no effect on the neighborhood in a negative sense whatsoever. They seem to coexist with banks, restaurants, gas stations. There were even some in what you would consider what appeared to me, I didn't have a copy of the zoning map in front of me, but what certainly appeared to me to be residential neighborhoods. And there was no effect at all. Sometimes there would be a line, sometimes there would be no line. The security was very tight. You had to show your license to get in. The state of Massachusetts, and I understand Connecticut's going to be doing the same thing, has a limit upon what you can buy, and that limit is transferable from store to store. So if you try to store hop and go above your limit, they know, because your license has been registered at the very first dispensary you went to. So if you bought everything you could at that dispensary and went to the one down the street, because again in Barrington, in the border town of Barrington, has a lot of New York customers, like Danbury probably would. They're all over the place. You just go to the next store and try to buy some more. Not going to work. Can't do it. It's very well regulated. The potency, I think somebody inquired about earlier, the potencies can be extremely high. They're not quite as high as medical dispensaries, but they can be very high. It's becoming a problem with heavy users, but they can be very high, probably as high as what you would find in the street. except for the fact that they're not adulterated with different product. And I don't want to get into what those products are on the street. We have a very sad and tragic history with those products, and it's getting worse and worse. This is a really good, positive first step. And as was alluded to, I think by either Attorney Mizuko or perhaps one of the representatives from the botanist, it's important to remember that say a web-based transaction in Danbury, if you deny this petition, a web-based transaction in Danbury can commence and be completed in Danbury, regardless of whether there's a retail establishment or not. In other words, let's say I wanted to buy some product, I could get my phone out, order on the web, complete the payment transaction on my phone in my house and have it delivered to my house. So there would be no difference between me doing that and having it delivered from a micro grower in Danbury or a major establishment in Waterbury. No difference from my point of view. A very big difference from the point of view of our constituents and our tax base, because while the 3% accrues in Danbury if the establishments are in Danbury, the 3% would be lost if the establishments were outside of Danbury. But the sales could still be initiated and completed within this city under the state statute. So a philosophical disposition that predisposes somebody to an antagonism or an ambivalence to retail sales in this community, with the hope that by denying that would temper sales, is probably a bit optimistic. The sales can still take place in this community. They can be commenced and completed in this community, but again, the taxes would be lost. Danbury is a retail mecca. Very few communities in Connecticut do retail like Danbury does. And one of the things that I think we need to come to terms with is that if we cede this market to other communities, people aren't just going to go to those other communities and buy product. They may buy a pair of socks when they're there, or ice cream, or a TV set, or a car. And that would be a sale that we would lose in Danbury. So it's integral, I think, to the retail base of Danbury. And again, I think this is a very conservative start. It's a very restrained start, but I think it's an important one, and I'm fully behind it. And I would hope that the commission would be too. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman Rotello. Commission members, any questions to Councilman Rotello at this time? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this petition? Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this petition? Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this petition? Is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition to this petition? Is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition to this petition? Is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition to this petition? Commission members, any other questions that you may have for any of the people that spoke this evening before I go to Ms. Calitro? Commissioner Melillo.
I actually have a question for Ms. Calitro, so I'm going to let you go to Ms. Calitro first.
Okay.
I just want you to know I have a couple questions for Ms. Calitro when you're done.
Absolutely. Ms. Calitro, if you have, the floor is yours, but hopefully you have some comments on some of the unanswered questions that we heard from speakers and maybe some statements, please.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, yes, I do. Again, on the, there was a question on the video, whether we could require it. I don't have any problem with a amendment to that section. Although I think it was Mr. Demeke indicated, and he probably knows those regs better than I, because I don't have to get a license and he does, that the cameras are not an issue. But I would not have a problem if you wanted to amend that section to include video cameras somewhere on the security plan. The security plan shall include video cameras, and we can work out some language. In response to Attorney Mizuko's comments, again, I think I provided to you what I believe is a legislative intent relative to the distance requirements and the uses for which we can provide or regulate those distances. It was pretty clear in the seminar that, and many times in the seminar, that we attended and is in the record, that they did not mean that list to be the only uses for which we could provide those requirements. So I'm comfortable with that. I know he had the concerns relative to identifying the uses. I think it's no different than our existing 3F2 regulations, repackaged stores. The same could be said for the mapping. It's the same mapping requirement, an A2 survey at 60 scale. Yes, I understand the distances may be a little bit different, but it seems okay for the package stores. And I don't think it's too much to ask. Again, we're, for this new use, new in the entire state of Connecticut, it's not the same as alcohol. It's still a Schedule 1 drug. So, if you have to do a little bit more work to ensure that you meet those distance requirements, I think that's kind of the least we could ask for them. So I would, again, respectfully suggest we keep the mapping the way it is. If we have some problems in administering it down the line, we could always go back. But at this point, I would leave it the way it is. I would leave the uses the way they are. I think you can identify public recreation areas. We have parks, public parks all over the place. We know where they are. The same could be said for the offices, the charitable institutions. I mean, I don't think there's any intent to say somebody works at home and they work for United Way, and so that home is, we're talking about, do they rent office space in a strip center or on Mill Plain Road or in a CG20 district, and that you would know. Again, that's no different than some of the other regs. So I would ask that you keep that the way it is. In terms of Mr. Gerardo's comments, we don't regulate land use by the identity of the user. If you can extrapolate that to some other use and not this use, you can imagine that's not what we do. A tattoo parlor is a tattoo parlor, whether I operate it, chairman operates it, Commissioner Melillo operates it, or somebody else operates it. It's a tattoo parlor. So we don't regulate land uses based on that. The state addresses the social equity issues at the licensing stage. I don't think that's our jurisdiction, with all due respect to his comments. I agree with him. The state obviously is only issuing 56 licenses. I can tell you as of today, they have 37,000 applications across the 8 licenses that they took applications for a total of 56. And in each category, there's the same number of social equity applicants as there is in the general lottery. So you can go on the website, you can see how many they're going to issue in each category, and whether it's to a social equity applicant or to a general or in the general lottery. In terms of Councilman Perkins' comments, again, and I think Councilman Rotella answered the question. There's no intention that we are restricting or prohibiting retail sales from the microcultivator. We're just saying you can't do it from that facility. You can deliver it to somebody. You can use a delivery service. They could use their own employees. We just don't want that to become more of a retail center. So we're not saying you can't, we're stopping or hindering any portion of their business model. We're not saying that at all. We're just saying you can't do it. If you opened up a facility in an IL-40 zone, you couldn't have the door where just people come in off the street and you can purchase it. They can deliver it. So they still have the opportunity. And again, as Councilman Rotella said, we do collect some tax revenue from that. So on the taxing side, we get that percentage. We do have to, and I know somebody brought up, I think Councilman Levy brought it up in the previous public hearing about the costs associated with that. While we do collect that revenue, this actually notification goes to the state on how much is earned. The state will notify the city of what to collect. It is the city's responsibility to collect that money. So there are some costs associated with it. But we would anticipate there may be some net proceeds that we could use towards, again, those specific programs that are outlined in the law. Again, in terms of education programs and streetscape improvements and things like that. There's six categories that we can use, but there is a component that we're responsible for collecting it. We have to report to DRS that we have collected it. And I think that those were kind of the highlights. I think we addressed, I addressed Attorney Mizuko's first comment, his other two comments. I would just suggest we kind of leave it the way it is for now. Let's start and see how it goes. We can always amend the regulation if we find that something is just unyielding. And we're not trying to be punitive. We're just trying to make sure that we've covered every base and we're careful and we're inclusive about what what the things that we need to protect. And other than that, I just going through my notes. Video, just give me 1 second if you don't mind.
No, take your time. No problem.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's it. Again, I think as I indicated, and it's been reiterated, it's a really conservative approach. This is a new arena throughout the state. It's a careful, we try to be really thoughtful about it. And, we had our foot in the water a little bit with the, obviously with the two dispensaries. We're kind of sort of in it a little bit. Our proposal would be see how it goes. And if we don't have problems, hopefully we won't. We have the opportunity to make some amendments to kind of loosen things up a little bit, but let's start small, let's start careful. We believe these regulations were crafted in accordance with what we were able to do pursuant to the law. We put a lot of time into it. We had a lot of conversations with attorneys at CCM and everybody across the board and webinars and everything else. Again, looking at other states, looking at other municipalities in Connecticut and what they've done. And I've crafted what I think is it will work for Danbury should you choose to go in that direction.
Yes, while we're on the subject of your hard work, thank you for that. But just a quick story. I know it's late. In my church, we got a new priest, and after a few of the masses, he says, "How am I doing?" I go, "You got to keep the homily. You got to cut it down. You talk too much. You're going 9-10 minutes here on a 60-minute mass. It's too much. It's too much." When Sharon became the planning director, after the first few meetings, I said to her, I go, "Sharon, your staff reports, they're too big. They're too big. You got to cut them down." But this one here is spectacular. Thank you very much for your work. It's got a lot covered, and I know how much research and roaming around you did to try and find out what goes into this thing here. Thank you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All I did was just echo what everybody else echoed. Everybody says the same thing about it, a common denominator for tonight.
Yeah, thank you. If you don't have any, other questions, Mr. Chairman, I would ask that, if you're in a position to, close it, that would be good.
Well, I just want to talk to you about a couple other things.
Oh, and Rob had some questions. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Just for one second. Ms. Calitro, everybody's talking about the money, and I know what 3% of a million is. We don't know if they're going to do $1 million or $2 million or $3 million or whatever, but I mean, it's the money we're going to get is designated in 6 areas. But a new job has to be created for the person to do the collecting of it. So there's a salary that's just removed right from it. The states, the sales go to the state says, this city, you're entitled to this. We got to go collect it. And then we got to spend the money on certain areas. We don't even know how much the money is, or nobody's even brought in any estimates. In fact, a year ago, this time, Councilman Rotello brought some newspaper articles that showed exactly what the city can expect. And I'm going to look those up. It's clearly not his opinion, which I wouldn't look up after a year, but there were factual or some good information, public information on that. So I really don't know how much the city is going to make on that. Just my comment. I don't think anybody can predict that. Should I go to Councilman Malillo, or are you looking something up there, Ms. Calicio, for me?
No, I was just looking up in case somebody asked me about the 6 areas. I was just.
Yeah, what are they?
Okay, so you can.
Streetscape.
So the tax funds become part of the municipality's general fund and may
General fund.
only be used for the following purposes:
Yeah.
streetscape improvements or other neighborhood developments in the communities where cannabis retailers or other establishments are located. So streetscape improvements and other neighborhood developments, education programs or youth employment and training programs in the municipality, services for individuals living in the municipality who were released from the DOC, Department of Corrections custody, probation, or parole, mental health or addiction services, youth service bureaus and municipal juvenile review boards, and community civic engagement efforts. And I should also say, I don't know for sure, Mr. Chairman, if it requires a new position in the finance department. I'm just saying the law requires the city to identify the person responsible for collecting. So when, for instance, let's just use Acreage because they're here. Let's Acreage reports to the state that they collected $1 million. The state tells Danbury, you have to go collect $30,000 or whatever it is from Acreage. We have to send out a letter. It has to, we have to follow up on it. It probably appears to be more work than a regular, tax bills that come out 4 times a year. But I don't know that would warrant a whole new position. I can't speak for the finance department, but
Yeah, I know.
It isn't like the state collects it and gives us a check and we say, oh, thank you very much. And the finance director puts it in an account and says, go figure, we can use it for these 6 things. There is some role that the city has to play for it. That's how that shook out. So.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Malillo.
Yes, I'm going to pick up where you left off because we're on this topic, and I did have a question about the financial aspect of it. I think back, Commissioner Haddad, you'll remember it was about 20 years ago. You were you were on the commission, and you were and you were looking at a possibility. Some people were claiming, here's this use in Danbury that's going to bring all this revenue in, and then there was another group of people saying, yes, but this same use is going to cost the city of Danbury X amount of dollars, and is it cost prohibitive? And I think the decision was made obviously not to allow that use in. And in fact, you wound up rezoning and creating a whole new zone, but but because the analysis was done that it would be more financially detrimental than beneficial. I'm curious if we could get some sort of a ballpark projection, because I don't want to be telling people that there's this windfall. We're gonna solve our education funding issues because we're going to allow this, so just so we can kind of get an idea, because Councilman Levy mentioned earlier in a different public hearing, but I'm going to recognize now because we did hear it tonight.
Yes.
That that he alluded to the fact that we weren't really sure what that would entail. And so if we could get some sort of ballpark projection, and I think we might be able to, because you can get an idea as to what some of the sales are maybe in Great Barrington, just an idea to say, okay, well, if that's what the sales is, what would 3% of that be? I think, like you mentioned, Councilman Rotello had some numbers earlier about a year ago. So I think we can get at least an educated guess as to what that would be. So if you wouldn't mind making that request, that we could get that information.
Sure. Right through me to Ms. Calitro.
So can I just clarify for the record what you?
Yes.
So are you asking me to find out if from states that collect? how much they collect, because I mean, I'm not really sure how that, number one, it's an estimate. You're not going to ask, they're not, and if I was a acreage, I wouldn't necessarily divulge my business model to us. All I could say was the state has projections on what it thinks this will generate from a statewide perspective that I probably have in my book here. But again, I'm not sure what you're asking me to do about that, because I mean,
I'd like to know a ballpark projection. I mean, if this is being, one of the things is being sold to us as, it's a financial benefit for the city. Can you give us an idea of what that financial benefit for the city would be? Is it $100,000? Is it $1 million? Is it 30,000? Is it it's going to be probably more than $30,000? But because I'm sure there's going to be some other costs that are going to offset it. I would imagine there's going to be some law enforcement costs and things along those lines that will also be generated as a result of it. Because I mean, we open up a new bar, there's going to be law enforcement costs generated from a new bar. So so I'm just kind of getting an idea. What would those projections be? That the city, from an economic standpoint, could look at.
okay, I mean, I'll try my best to come up with something that makes sense. And again, with all due respect, Commissioner Malila, I'm not selling it, that my petition isn't like we're being sold, that it's going to be an economic, that I'm just saying to you,
Yeah.
I looked at uses of the 9 or of the 11 that the state issues licenses for. I only propose for which we would get some tax benefit. We would get some tax revenue. And again, it can't solve the school problem because you can't put it in and use it just to fund the school. You can only use it for the 6 items that are in the law that says, you can use it for. They tell us, they're very specific about that. But I can get some, I can try to like hone in on some projections, even, if I can try to call the state and see, because they did some projections on what the state could potentially earn. So how are they doing that? I'll do my best to try to come back with some of that. There is, there is also a provision that within the first 30 days, I have to get the law out. So we can, for the first 30 days, you could charge an applicant up to $50,000 in fees to help defray the costs associated with what might happen, when a facility first opens, whether you need additional police on the road or something like that. So I guess make it akin to kind of, if I'm not saying this happened there, but like in Brookfield when Chick-fil-A opened and it was kind of sort of, oh my God, Federal Road was crazy, right? And so if that we could charge somebody up to $50,000, I think, a month. I'd have to read back only for the first month or couple of months to cover the cost of that. So if we needed extra police, but I will do my best to put something together for you to address that question.
Thank you. That was just one question, Commissioner Head. I have a few more. So next one, this is, I think I know I'm looking, this might be more of a confirmation, but then again, too, I'm not positive because this is unique. Normally, we're dealing with licensing a land. And you mentioned how this is licensing an individual. So when you mentioned that the state is giving out so many licenses, would it be conceivably possible for an individual to get licensed and say, I'm going to operate Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday in this vicinity, and I would like to open up Tuesday, the other 3 days in Danbury. Now, so like in other words, is the licenses tied to a facility, or could one guy serve multiple facilities on different days?
No, the facility. So for instance, they are, as I indicated, I'll go to the retailer. They're issuing in this round 12 licenses for retailers. So let's say they're the adult use retailers. So the straight retailers, they're issuing 6 licenses to social equity applicants and 6 licenses that out of the general lottery. So 12 in total.
Right,
So
but you mentioned.
they're tied to a site. They're not tied to like a person. I'm just saying the person, the definition, a person, so-and-so that we adopted last year came right out of the statute of the new law. I propose to amend that by saying a facility in which there is a person. But the state's license is tied to a person and a location.
Okay, so it's a person and location.
Yes.
But
yes.
specific location. It's not
Yes.
because doctors can, we know doctors' offices have Danbury offices and New Milford offices. So it's not like they could have a Danbury office and a New Milford office for a cannabis establishment. It has to be either one or the other.
Yeah. Although my understanding is that, for instance, the acreage facility, it's existing, so we can talk about it. They have a medical, they have a dispensary license now. They can, and I believe they can also get a separate rec license that they don't have to use there and can use within a certain distance of where their medical facility is as part of their licensing.
So I think I heard the number 54 somewhere, and that I may not have, but
56 total licenses issued by the state.
So that's 56 actual locations in the
56. So that's delivery, food service food and beverage manufacturer, micro cultivators, product manufacturers, product packagers, retailers, transporters, and hybrids. So in this round of what the state's doing, they're going to only issue 56 total licenses.
And so that's 56 total locations to 56 individuals who are tied to one location. It's not 56 individuals who could, like one individual.
Right. No. They're tied to the location because there's all the requirements of the location. There's security, there's monitoring, there's videos, everything's tied to what, and they're inspected.
Right. But I was just thinking that you could potentially generate enough maybe where you could have, like, again, you can have, I'm going to do 3 days here, 4 days there, and generate enough income to make both venues worthwhile. And I just wanted to make sure that we're talking a total statewide individual licenses are tied location and individuals. Not
they have to show that they have location approval from us.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they're issued their provisional license. Then everybody's, searching now, let's just say for some land, they have to get a provisional license and then they have to come back to us. So they have to have gone through the initial process at the state level. But by the time, before they can apply, let's just assume this regulation goes through, before they can actually open up, they have to show us they have a final license that's tied to that site.
Okay. It was mentioned earlier how there was anticipation that potentially there would be some New York people coming in to purchase in Danbury. Is it legal to purchase in Danbury and take over state lines?
Not at this time, because you need to be a Connecticut resident for a medical card. So there will be a potential for New York residents to come over once adult use is active. Because again, we're not going to collect any information from that individual. So
theoretically, it would be possible for an individual. I mean, there are some people who may know what I mean when I talk about a Brewster run. It's possible that there can be Danbury runs.
Oh no, yeah, I believe that's.
Yeah, Connecticut right now goes to Massachusetts and does Massachusetts runs, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And my Brewster run used to be Coors Light.
Hence one of the reasons why you want this use to be on an arterial collector, so that you're not like drawing a lot of cars, because the generation rate is pretty high if you want to go look in that land use code.
But is that a violation
into neighborhood streets?
Isn't that a violation of law to take it over to purchase it in one state and take it in another? Didn't Connecticut law actually prohibit that?
I don't know, I don't know. I mean, I could find out the answers. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just.
Can I say this? I'm sorry. It's federally.
Mr. Chairman, it's really.
Yeah, I don't know, Mr. Chair, with all due respect to everybody else, Mr. Chairman, if he's asking me, or now we're reopening it to the public, or was that my rebuttal or not? I'm not sure.
I guess that was a question for, from.
I'll find out.
Commissioner Malolo to
Okay.
Ms. Calitro. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. The other thing one of the things I've always had concerns with, whether it was, whatever aspect of it, I'm not so sure. I know everyone says it's legal. Connecticut legislature passed the law, but now we also talk about Schedule 1, and so, how is it legal when it's not legal under the federal government?
Because there's memorandum from, and I don't know if attorney.
So we're not opening it up.
No.
The federal government.
No, they're not
raid
enforcing.
on a Danbury.
Yeah, no.
Can I get legal opinion on that?
I
No,
have the
you
answer.
can't. You can't take any more. You can't take comments from anybody else unless Attorney Edwards or Casagrande. Because
No, I would just look for Attorney Edwards or Casagrande if they want to respond to that, but we can't go back to the public.
yeah, they're not in. They we can provide some documentation about what they're enforcing and not enforcing, but I mean, there's 3/4 of the states in the country have now some kind of recreational or adult use.
In California, you can go shoplift in Los Angeles, and as long as you don't steal a high enough value, it's not illegal in Los Angeles. But it doesn't mean that I'm going to do that and I want to do that in Danbury, because California is not prosecuting for stealing. So I mean, there are times when things are legal in the United States. I mean, I can think right now there's a huge controversy regarding things that supposedly are legal in some states and not legal in other states, and there's an executive order being issued, and I mean, there's a whole can of worms regarding that, and I just want to just curious along those lines, because I'm also concerned.
Well,
with
you want to let
idea-
Attorney Casagrande comment on that?
Okay.
I don't know.
Attorney Casagrande?
Yeah. The answer, Mr. Chairman, is I don't know. I mean, I agree with Sharon that there have been MOUs in the Justice Department in recent years. You have the federal legislation, I think Senator Booker introduced. I mean, the reality is we're proceeding under state law. State law is specifically authorizing these regulations. Yes, there is this inherent discrepancy between how can you authorize things on a state level that are technically still illegal on the federal level. But at this point in time, and again, if I could get you some more research on that, Mr. Malol, if you wanted to delve deeper into it. But, the reality is the state has authorized it. And I can't see in this climate, the federal government, turning around and suing commissions or state governments at this point in time. But again, I'm happy
they're suing states for other things of much minor, than this. I can just, it's one of those scenarios where, I mean, it all depends on who's, it all depends on who's sitting at the desk in the Attorney General's office
who's
in Washington, D.C.
Who's the Attorney General, right?
Yeah.
But then again, that's why I don't want to give you a drive-by opinion. I'd like to, and I don't think you need to leave the hearing open for that because you're asking for legal advice, but we could certainly get back to you with some more robust information on that.
Yeah, my other concern also is, the possibility of opening the city bank accounts up to the fact that now it's very clear that the city of Danbury will be taking revenue as a result of the sale of a Schedule I narcotic, which potentially what implications would that have for the city's bank accounts and for them being seized, for them being locked and stuff along those lines? Again, under some of the federal laws, there's a couple things that concern me in relationship as we're thinking about this, because there are some implications potentially down the road that may be detrimental, and that's just where my concerns are.
1 second, Joanne, can you please let Mr. Coelho back in? Sorry to interrupt the meeting. Okay, I was trying to find you here. I was going to send you a text, but I want to let him get back in.
I got it. He's
Okay.
coming. It's just taking a minute.
Thank you.
says joining, so it must be popping up any minute now.
Let's just wait 10 seconds or so to get him back in here. There he is. I see him.
Yeah.
He is
Great.
connecting now. Okay. I'm sorry to interrupt. Where are we next? Where are we at? There you are, Mr. Coelho.
Those were the questions and concerns I had. A couple of them, attorney counsel are going to mention a legal opinion. So, there's that.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess there's I was just reading briefly about the Cole memo, which instructs the Department of Justice as to how they're going to treat there's a memorandum issued in 2013 by the Justice Department as to how they're going to treat marijuana over the state lines and what their priorities are.
Right, but a 2013 memorandum may have been changed in 2014 or 2016 because, again, it all depends on who's.
No, I understand that, but I thought it was still active.
Yeah.
It hasn't been superseded yet. Anyway, we have Attorney Casagrande for that. Thank you. Where else are we now? Anything else of, I saw, who had their hand up? Mr. Hawley? Commissioner Hawley, did you have your hand up a minute ago?
Yeah, I did. I wanted to ask Sharon if she would be open to possibly including some kind of amendment in all this, putting a time frame to like revisit this. I know we're doing like the slow approach, but I kind of want to put that into writing so that way we have a chance to come back to this as, I don't know. Yeah.
I'm not sure a time frame for getting you these answers. Is that what you're asking?
No, like a time frame in the regulations to like revisit them and redo it. Say if this were to pass.
Oh, you could do that at any time.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no, I mean, if in a month or you get the first application and you say, oh yeah, they were right, we should change that. We can file an amendment. You can, instruct me to do it. I can do it. You can do it on your own. You can take a petition from somebody else. I mean, once the regulation is in place, it's like anything else. Anybody can propose to amend the regulations.
Okay. And I also had a question. I'm newer to land use and these type of things. Is it common in these kind of discussions to reference how much money a city might make on a certain land use decision? Is that common? Is that considered good zoning, as Attorney Marcus would call it?
I mean, I don't recall. I mean, I'm not even sure I was kind of around when Commissioner Manlilla was talking about that other scenario. I don't necessarily look at it that way. What something may from an economic. I just think there is the potential for some economic benefit because you're allowed to charge an additional fee and it to be used for a specific purpose. That doesn't happen with any other land use that I'm necessarily aware of. It would just generate revenue on its own. They put it into the law for a reason, and to try to do things. So the expectation is it would generate something for the state and whoever wants to do it and definitely for the state. And so they have some, projections on that. Is it good land use? We don't normally regulate by any specifics of it. You can say every new land use has the potential to generate something. This is just a tad different because there's a specified tax associated with it that you don't find in anything else, I don't think.
Commissioner Haddad, may I comment?
Yes, you can.
Okay, through you, Commissioner Hawley. I normally would agree with you on what is an economic value. It just we don't operate in it, or we don't always operate in a vacuum. We do bring some of the expertise with us to these petitions. As long as you put them on the record during a public hearing, we can reference them. And this is one of those scenarios where last year with the moratorium, a possible economic benefit for the city was mentioned. Tonight, a possible economic benefit for the city was mentioned as a advantage of changing our regs to allow this use. And so that's the only reason why I put it in there. I don't want to just say, we can have a potential economic benefit and that economic benefit is very minute, or in the long run, it's actually a detriment. I just want to know. I just wanted to know what that is. And like I said, I'm not looking for an exact number from Sharon. I'm just looking for like a ballpark, just so that we know, is there what is the economic benefit in the city of Danbury for doing this, and is that economic benefit outweighed by something else? But like I said, if a brewery was coming in, I wouldn't want to say, well, how many people are going to now come in and visit this location, which is, I would know as far for most land use things, I would agree with you, but because this one is so different and unique with so many little scenarios, that's the only reason why I'd ask for that one.
And my last thing I want to say, on page 8, can we get rid of the gendered language regarding to the police, his or her designee? I did like the quick control F over the other regulation, the rest of the regulations, and there's no other gendered language. So I was hoping we get some consistency there.
I'm sorry, on page what? Oh, on the police chief?
Yeah, police chief, yeah. Would you like do there? Would that work?
Or their designee, yeah, sure.
Okay, that's it.
Commissioner Hall, you said there was 2 spots or 1?
No, just 1 spot that I was explaining. I like did
it.
Control F over the whole regulations, and I wasn't able to find his or her mentioned in there, so I wanted some consistency.
Okay. So let's talk about housekeeping. Ms. Calitro, we have 3C4G, which we're going to add how distance is measured. We have 3C4P2, the amendment regarding the transfers of ownership. We have the 3rd amendment was some language regarding video. Then I think we have something coming from Attorney Casagrande. And we can all do that. We can still close the public hearing and still receive that information, right?
Yeah.
Coming from
I mean, the only thing that I would suggest is that if I come back to you with some estimates on the economics, then I would keep it open for that, because there might be some other public comment associated.
I think Commissioner Malillo was just about to say that.
Yeah, and if we're making textual changes, I would want to allow a member of the public to comment on a textual change on the petition as well.
Right, so we got some homework to do, and we'll probably want to keep it open. This is where we're heading with this. Attorney Casagrande, your box is good?
I would keep it open. The financial information that you're asking is evidentiary.
Okay.
So it's not like you're just asking Sharon to comment on evidence that's already in the record. You're asking for additional evidence. So I think the most conservative position would be just keep the hearing open.
Okay, so we're keeping the hearing open. So if, for example, Councilman Rotello wants to dig through his notes and find out that information, he can reach out to Sharon and we can gather it at the next meeting.
Right.
Sounds good. I think we did a lot tonight. I think we accomplished a lot. Thank you, everyone. Anything else, anybody? So I would look.
Could I just make a comment?
Sure, Ms.
Maybe
Calitro.
get Dan's, I'm sorry, Dan, your opinion. Can we limit the discussion, keeping it open for the limited purposes of that, getting responses from you, getting the revised regulation with the changes in it so you all can see it, and then bringing you some information on the numbers, for which obviously anybody could comment, but not again having to live through everything again? Not that I'm trying to.
The answer is yes.
Okay.
You can limit it.
Okay, so someone can make a motion to on the certain topics that the next meeting, the conversation would be only on those topics.
I'm always cautious about limiting conversations. We did allude a little earlier on that there was a potential that we're going to be receiving information. For example, I don't know if Councilman Levy left anticipating that he'd have an opportunity to speak again. And I think his is financial, so he could probably come in under that aspect as well. But still, I don't know. It's not like it's one of those public hearings where we've had 90 people logged in on. So
well, we said we could. That doesn't mean that the motion may not reflect that. Anyway.
No. That's why I'm just throwing it out for a discussion for a comment now, rather than beleaguer it under a motion. That's all.
Got it. Anything else? Attorney Casagrande, Ms. Calitro, anything on your end? No?
No, thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's, anybody want to put a motion forward?
I'll make a motion to continue.
There's a motion made by Commissioner Melillo to continue the public hearing. Boom, boom, boom. Hold on one second. And that is for July 26th, 2022. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Hawley. Any discussion? Not hearing or seeing any hands. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
I just want to clarify, Commissioner Haddad,
Sure,
Commissioner
go.
David had his hand up. I want to verify he was actually voting and not looking to make a comment.
I was looking to make a comment. I don't see us rehashing what we hashed tonight. I'd like to limit it to what the questions that you want answered, and whoever wants to discuss it, discusses it.
Thank you.
I
Vote was taken, so we'll put you down for no.
whatever. I just, you know.
8-1. Motion passes. Let's see. We don't have any continuation of any public hearings. We don't have anything else under old business for discussion of possible action. Under new business.
Mr. Chairman, Mr.
Yes.
Chairman, wait. Did you want me to change the vote?
Sure.
Okay.
He had his hand up as that, we'll call it, we'll say that there was a time delay on his AOL dial-up.
Got it.
Yeah. There's a time delay. It's like way past my bedtime. I get up at 4:30 in the morning. So, yalla, let's go.
All right. Under new business, number one, first petition of 40-44 NPR LLC, property owner Robert Campisi for a special permit for cafe liquor license for Revolution, 40 Mill Plain Road, E15110 in the CA80 zone. Public hearing is scheduled for August 9th, 2022. And we're looking to refer this out. It's new business. So does anybody want to?
No,
Hey,
no, it's not. It's a
Wait.
special
Referral.
permit for
special permit, we don't have to
cafe
do it.
liquor. It's a liquor
Petition-
permit.
Petition by Delaware, MMP Realty, thank you, by the way. LLC, property owner, City of Danbury, 40 Apple Ridge Road, E17061 and E17061-1 for change of zone from IL 40 to RA 40. Public hearing date to be determined. So we don't have a public hearing date on that. So we still want to
No,
refer this
not
one
yet.
out.
So that would be for acceptance and referral.
So anybody want to make a motion to receive this petition, refer to the planning commission for their recommendation, notify all surrounding communities that need to be notified according to state statutes, publish it in the town clerk's office and all other necessary required publications according to state statutes, and set the public hearing date, which will be determined at a future date, subject to COVID. Who wants to make that motion? I see Mr. Jowdy's hand. Thank you. Anybody want to second it? I saw Joanne's hand, but she doesn't qualify for that. Who wants to second that?
Commissioner Hylinski will.
Thank you, Commissioner Hylinski. Any discussion?
I have a quick question, Commissioner
Sure.
Haddad.
Yes.
So the motion was to schedule the public hearing for a date to be determined. Should we? I think we should note that to be determined within our statutory deadlines. Just to be clear.
Beautiful.
Because we're not actually setting a firm date. I'd hate to see somewhere down the line someone challenge us on that one.
You got it. Good point. Good pickup. Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. No correspondence. Are there any other matters? Any other matters? Any other matters? Under for reference only, petition of Maria Lima Takori and Isabel Lima to amend section 3F2D1A of the zoning regulations, reduce distance requirement between package stores from 2,000 feet to 1,000 feet. Public hearing scheduled for August 9, 2022. And a second one under for reference only is a petition of 3775 LLC and Robert Morrissey, 1-3 and unnumbered lot, Pembroke Road, G08029, G08030, and G08098 for change of zone from RA 40 to RMF 10. Public hearing is scheduled for August 9th, 2022. And I don't have anything else on this paper. So if anybody wants to make a motion to
Motion
adjourn,
to adjourn.
I'm not going to argue. Who made that motion?
Joe Raya.
Joe Raya, thank you. Good to hear from you tonight. Anybody want to second that?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Coelho. Any discussion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, let the record show at 11:21, we are adjourning, and we will see you on July 26th. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Have a
you.
great night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Aye.
Great
Good
meeting.
night.
tonight.